Alrighty. Greetings and welcome to the seventh episode of the Black Ronins series, courtesy of YouTube. I'm your host, Sigma Jones. My co-host, Kirigakure Jones, is in the background. I'll be bringing him up pretty soon. First and foremost, just want to give a shout out to to our subscribers. Thanks for listening in. Thanks for tuning in. We truly appreciate the love and support. 日本の活躍のために YouTube の The Black Ronin シリーズへようこそ。どうもありがとうございました。Hope you all are having a wonderful night or morning wherever you are today or this evening. I tell you, we have a lot that we're going to be talking about tonight. Definitely stuff that's SYSBM related, but also things that are related to the Japanese culture. And for those who are a fan of this series, we really try to hone in on brothers who immerse themselves within the Japanese culture. And for some, pretty much becoming part of that culture. Despite, our background or skin color we have, we truly embrace that aspect. So, without further ado, let me bring up my co host who is well immersed within this culture. None other than my good friend and brother online, Mr. Kiregakure Jones. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
はい、ありがとうございます。All right, we are back again for Black Ronin of Japan number 7. Looking forward to it. And 日本人のリスナーのために、聞いてくれてありがとうございます。Black Ronin of Japan シリーズ、よろしくお願いします。
Hi, hi. Yeah, oh my goodness. There's a lot that we're going to be talking about tonight. In fact, some of your recent videos have inspired some of the topics we're going to be really getting into. But yeah, I've already been looking forward to this particular episode. This will actually be the bedrock of the ways we'll be talking about the livings of the shinobi as well as the livings of the samurai, and how both lifestyles could literally be incorporated into today's modern times.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to it, and I think everyone will get some usefulness out of these conversations.
Absolutely. And shout out to Logic's Finest. He's my co host over on the War Room series. Interesting story. I told Paul about this on last week, but right after we did our recent episode, we were having a conversation on the back end, and all of a sudden, my microphone pretty much kicked us out of our session. And so turns out that it busted a fuse in, I guess, somewhere deep within the microphone. So I had no choice but to go and buy another one. But it was interesting. We was really having some deep conversations on the back end, and then just out of nowhere, we were both kicked out because my microphone just stopped working.
It's too much game. It overloaded the circuitry.
Indeed, indeed. Well, I am going to use my inner David Carroll when I say that before we get into the meat of this episode,
Uh-oh.
there's a few topics that we're going to discuss up front that will, of course, serve as the intro to this masterpiece.
Okay.
So, first and foremost, there is a YouTuber who goes by the name of Glendon Cameron. And I highly recommend a lot of brothers follow him on his YouTube channel. He talks about many different aspects and topics. He mainly focuses on business aspects, but he also has some conversations in regards to the ways of Black America and how detrimental the mindset of Black America could be for anybody who can essentially do better than themselves. So recently he put out a video, and I'm actually going to go ahead and drop the link to that video in the chat box so that way you guys can go and see it for yourself. But in this particular video, he talks about a story that happened to him where back in the 1980s, he actually visited Japan. And he talks about how great Japan was for him, how he truly enjoyed being there. The people there were so great for him and everything. Pretty much had nothing negative to say about Japan. But fast forward to modern times today, and he said he sees all these videos of not just black men, but just black people in general who are suddenly coming out and saying that the Japanese are racist, and that when they went to the homeland, or excuse me, the land of the rising sun, that they just did not get a welcoming experience. Now I was like, something is not adding up. And I'm pretty sure my good brother over here, Kirigakure, probably shares the same line of thinking as I am at this moment.
Yeah, I find it interesting because I will say lately, though, that unfortunately, because a lot of the kind of the violence that's come about as a result of the protests and things like that, a lot of that stuff gets beamed over there with zero context. So I think that the people that are watching these videos, some of them are getting pretty freaked out because, the one thing that Japanese people really can't stand or abide is like people who are disorderly. So I figure that um, unfortunately, there's a lot of damage being done to the brand worldwide because of people are seeing these images. Um, and you know how it is with media, it's kind of like, you have this narrow window into a society. And of course, people tend to think that everyone is like that in the society. So I think that on some level, um, I mean, the game doesn't change though. If you go to Japan land, speak the language as best as you can, dress nice, be presentable, be on your best behavior. And I think you can overcome a lot of those issues. But I mean, beyond that, I wonder because from what I hear on the other side of the game is that unfortunately some ethnic folks go over there to Japan land and they're just really they act like they own the place. They make no effort to appreciate the culture. They don't really speak the language that well. They just kind of go and demand stuff. And I'm not sure if I think that's rubbing people the wrong way. So, it could be a combination of both. So, I don't think I've never in all my travels, I've never been disrespected ever. While I've been over there. So there's that. That's my thought.
No, I'm definitely right in line with you as well. And it got me thinking of my last trip to Japan, which next month would make it a full year since that trip. And in my case, I had a traveling partner that came with me. And reflecting on the entire trip, I can definitely say it was a first hand experience of what it's like living outside of the black box, and then an individual who, yes, they're removed from America, but they still live within the black box. And what I got from that is, my traveling partner, 3 days into the trip, and he was already homesick. And he was talking about he can't wait to go back to America, and he wanted to go back around his people and everything and the life that he was accustomed to and all. Whereas myself, 1 week in Japan is not enough. Like literally on my day when we were heading back, I was contemplating of just missing the flight and staying another whole week in Japan. Like for me, Japan literally became a secondary home.
Hmm.
And my experience from that, how I truly embraced the culture and I truly didn't think within the black box. The experience that Glendon Cameron and yourself, you have experience, I can relate to because that's what I came into that environment of. You know what? This is a completely different culture. This is something that is foreign, but it's something that I want to learn and I actually want to grow more into. And just coming with that mindset, it literally just every imagination you can think of going to Japan, it almost literally came true overnight. And one thing you talked about in your live stream earlier today is about when when a brother is a true practitioner of SYSBM, he needs to have a sense of imagination. And
Yes.
I think for a lot of individuals who think within the black box, they don't have any imagination because to them, everything is black and white.
Yes, and sadly, it's because that imagination is literally beaten out of them. You know, I'm a cookie you, I'm a whoop you, I'm gonna beat the black off you, nigga, all that kind of stuff. So, and it's really sad because, like, and you've probably noticed this as well, but I'm out and about with my family, and we're just having a good time. And I noticed that they'll have a little black boy and he'll be the only male in like a group of you know who,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no other male company or in sight. And this boy, he's a little boy. He wants to talk, he wants to act out, he wants to interact with this, that, and the third. And they're constantly yelling at him, "Shut up, nigga! You ain't nothing, man. Your daddy black. F that nigga." I'm like, come on, man. And they crush the imagination right out of them, and it's the saddest thing ever.
Yeah, it truly is. And even, you know, I'm now understanding the importance of teaching the youth while they're young. Because when you have a young boy just like that who is constantly being berated just for being a male, and on top of that, a black male, when he gets to adulthood, he already has this sense that his worth in life, his value, is based on his skin color.
Yeah,
And that's a dangerous lifestyle to live. To
it
think,
sure is.
breathe, and thrive. Well, I wouldn't even say thrive, but so to speak, live off the black box. You know, you're constantly like Glenn Cameron said something that really resonated with me in this particular video and also in his videos throughout this channel. He was saying that when a person thinks skin color first, and especially with ebony people, when they think black first, they truly limit themselves in really becoming whatever potential they have because all of their failures and especially any wrongdoing that happens in their life, they're going to assume that it's because of their skin color, not realizing that, you know, there's other means and other factors that may not necessarily be within your control, but how you react to it could definitely put you in better position than if you were thinking black and white.
Exactly. And when we get into uh, the the way conversation, we talk about the way of the samurai, the way of the shinobi. I mean, that's an extremely dangerous because, from a shinobi's point of view, what you put out into the universe, you get right back.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think that everyone is against you because of your skin color, then guess what? Everybody's going to be against you because of your skin color. And like I'm watching some of the riots and whatnot happening in these various cities, and you've got people saying the most insane stuff. And when you try to be logical with people, and you say, look, this isn't the way for you to come up in the world, they can't hear you because my skin color. And that's just all they think about. I mean, the black box is insidious. You've got some people that are kind of hanging on to the edge and might be able to climb over, but I call them the race men. These are the guys that are, black first. We black, you black, your mama black. Them kind of guys. I mean, you're not going to survive in the 21st century. You're just not. You're just consigning yourself to bottom of the barrel underclass status forever.
Absolutely. And that leads to the point that sometimes I hear some of these brothers online that talk about, well, I've been to Japan and I didn't get, the same treatment y'all got. People were looking at me crazy. People call me the N word, and so to speak to the
What?
Japanese women. Yeah, you
What?
got some individuals saying that, and my response to them is this: okay, we're not saying that you're going to get the exact experience that myself, Kitagakure Jones, DK Polyglot, or any other brother out there who has been successful in the land of the rising sun. But I will say this: if you go to Japan still living in the black box, I guarantee 100% you're not going to get the experience we got just off of
Absolutely
that.
not. And I personally don't believe that any Japanese person, unless they're like hanging out with like yakuza dudes or just crazy people, are going to just walk up to you and say the N word. I mean, I don't believe that. I need to see some evidence of that because they wouldn't dream of it. I mean, stories like that, I'm like, okay, well, that's suspect to me because even if people don't like you, they're not going to call you out like that.
Exactly. And honestly, like the racism, or so to speak, racism in Japan, me personally, I look at it on the level of innocence compared to, say, racism in America. And even then, like, it's not even that big of a deal. You got, and not tell anybody this, a lot of my Japanese friends, I was literally the first black man they ever met in their life. All of the black people they have heard of is either through TV or from online or from the books they read. And so, sure, they may have had some preconceptions about black folks, but after they got a chance to meet me and really see the type of person I am, they're like, wow, he's no different than me and I, or me and you. And it actually makes their curiosity even more great because, especially when you have brothers like us who have truly immersed ourselves in the Japanese culture, it goes a long way in spreading a great aspect of how Japanese will treat you. And I'm just saying, I'm a witness to that.
No, that's absolute facts. And I'm thinking ahead because hopefully everything can line up. I'm still kind of worried about the vaccine thing and what kind of quarantine Japan is going to have, say, June, July of next year.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever we get the opportunity to go out there, if we can make it together, if we go separately, I mean, my whole thing is, I plan on basically putting in a lot of FaceTime, just talking to people as appropriate because I feel like that I don't want to be associated with what they see on their screens. That's an absolute no-no.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's not how it's going down. But even still, I really have a hard time believing that they just go. I mean, I could probably see that in Korea. That could be a possibility there. Maybe China, well, definitely China, but I mean Korea maybe. But Japan, no, I don't believe that they would just come to you like, "Nigga!" I mean, unless like they thought it was like the cool thing to do because they've watched CB4 1,000 times.
Yeah, like I said, I don't believe it either. Like, I think these guys are really just stretching their imagination. Keep in mind, you know, no offense, but most of these guys that are saying this, they're coming from the military and all, so they may not be immersed per se in the Japanese culture, even though they're living on the base and working there. There is a difference between working in on an American company or American establishment in another country, and then actually immersing yourself in that country's culture. So I'm like you, I find it hard to believe that Japanese people just randomly come up to any black person, call them the N word, or even just say it behind their backs. Like, I'm
Yeah, I
sorry, my
mean,
my experience is hard for me to even just think that way because my experience, I was almost treated like a celebrity, being
yeah.
this tall black man and having the shape of a American football player. I had people who thought that I literally came from the NFL, and I had to tell them, no, 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 I don't play NFL.
I mean, and even if that were to happen, that's where you gotta make sure your skills is tight. Because I mean, look, I mean, Japan is like anywhere else. Some people love you, some people will hate you, other people are just being different. So, if anyone were to disrespect, I got, the appropriate phraseology to handle that. And sometimes you do have to tell people to back up, that kind of thing, but it's extremely rare. So I don't know, but I mean, it's all about keeping brothers in the black box. They don't want you to go. Like, they're not happy, they messed up somehow or something happened to them. So because of that, so no one else can go and have a good time and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, which leads to the next topic before we actually get into the meat of the video. So, David Carroll dropped a recent video earlier today, and definitely for those who haven't seen it, I highly recommend you go over there to check it out because it's a hot one. But in his intro, he mentioned that in the upcoming Rabbit Hole Productions, he's going to be talking about a video that recently came out where I guess a black man or a brother was in line at a Mexican restaurant somewhere in California, and there was an Asian woman in front of him, and so he tried shooting his shot, give her his business number, wanted to take her out to dinner, and from what it sounds like, she just gave a soft rejection saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm married," and everything, and just left it at that. But then all of a sudden, he gets enraged, goes on a tirade and everything. And the Asian woman obviously takes out her phone and starts recording this brother just, acting out of his mind. And David Carroll says now the triple C's got a hold of this video and they're using it against the dysfunctions of black men. And so I'm looking forward to looking at this video, and I already got an idea of how it plays out. But one thing I really want to say is this: that is a prime example when I say SYSBM is not for every brother. And just hearing that information highlights the importance of there's just some brothers who just will not have the mental mastery of themselves and the discipline to really get caught up in the black box. And that there was a perfect example of that brother is not an SYSBM practitioner.
That is facts. So, the detractors will say that we're trying to like mass convert people to SYSBM, but it's like, well, in my opinion, I mean, this is basically art or social media documenting life. You got a lot of brothers out here who are living the lyrics, but they've never seen an SYSBM video. They don't even know what the acronym is, but they're already living that life. And so, I didn't see that particular video, but yeah, I mean, if this guy is flipping out because she said that she was married, then he probably didn't have the presence of mind to know that when an Asian woman typically says, "Hey, I'm married," that means she's not willing to creep around with dude on the DL, unlike
Mm-hmm.
some other type of demographics that would be willing to do that even if they had on the ring. So, I mean, a lack of self-awareness, a lack of cultural sensitivity, and I really agree. I mean, true practitioners of SYSBM are few and far between.
Very few. And really, it highlights two things that I really want to touch on that topic. And that's this. Number one, and I'm speaking mainly for Sigma Jones here, but it actually reiterates a talking point that you mentioned on your videos yourself, Kitagakade. And that is here in America, within my house, I'm SYSBM. But outside of my house, and as long as I'm on American soil, I am MGTOW when it comes to American women. I pretty much have made up in my mind that when it comes down to westernized women, especially here in America, I only deal with them on necessary basis. And by that I mean on the job or having to um, deal with them from a business standpoint, a corporate standpoint, perfectly fine. But anything personal, anything social, I just don't go out of my way. And the reason being is because once a brother gets a taste of other cultures, especially when he leaves American soil, and he get a chance to experience women who actually line up with his cultural beliefs, he's really going to shut himself off to any type of women who don't follow the same beliefs as he do. Some will say that's being antisocial. Some will say, so to speak, you can't get any women or whatnot. Sure, believe what you want to believe. But personally, I'm just like, look, I have met gorgeous women from a country that really treats me as one of them. Especially now going on the path of a samurai or a Ronin, they literally see me as one of them. Therefore, I have more of a cultural connection to the people of Japan than I do with American people. And to me, it is what it is.
Wow, that's pretty profound because I'm with you on that. Like when I was still in the office, the four walls of my home, SYSBM, but when it was time to go out and about, yeah, it was MGTOW. And what's really interesting is this whole digital nomad thing. One of the things that it's done is it's really sapped the power out of pound me too. That went away because there's no one at home that can get you caught up in that situation. Notice you haven't really heard about it except in passing. So I believe that that's when the powers that be switched over to this whole BLM thing, but that's another conversation for another time. um I have to say truly that I first dated a woman from overseas. I dated a Korean lady, and I was with her for a minute, like a couple of years. Then I dated another Korean lady, and that was a shorter term fling, but it was intense. And then I met young Hinata, and that was pretty much a done deal. So for me personally, I mean, I can look at a westernized female and I can say, okay, well, she's attractive on some level, sure. And I can see on paper that, okay, probability of success is higher in some areas versus others. And, some brothers can definitely make it work. But my whole thing is, I'm with you. I'm like, man, get your passport, get on a plane, and do something different because at this stage in my life it's like, well, quite frankly, she's going to bury me because she's a couple years younger than I am, so I know I'm dying first. So it's like she, young Kinata is my other half. I mean, it's like, it's like attaching your arm, that's how tight it is. So it's like I can't even really. And, if I may, so Coach Greg Adams, made a video. I don't know if you had a chance to see it. It was basically like, are these females too far gone? And
Mm.
it was a profound question because he was talking about the WAP video, that debauchery, and
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, I mean, look, if you look at the video, I don't even know how many. It's got like millions and millions of views. It's got like, last time I looked, it was like 17,000 likes or something like that. Comments was off the he's, you know. So I was just like, yeah, this is why we don't watch TV at home. Like my daughter, we don't watch American TV. We watch Korean and Japanese TV. That's like 80% of our household diet. Um, I can't bring my daughter up in the ebony American culture. I can't. Young Kinata's under very strict orders to raise my daughter as a Japanese because I know that if she comes up in this American mess, she's going to be, her life will be destroyed. It'll be ruined. And I can't have that for my daughter, So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've been thinking about this like really hard. I'm like, man, I mean, if you really want the maximum level of probability of success, you're just gonna get on a plane. And for brothers like us, we already know what the destination is. It's gonna be Osaka or Narita. Dochi no hou ga ii desu ka?
Hi, hi,
Which one do you
hi.
prefer?
Well, I haven't been to Osaka yet. That's definitely on my next destination when I come back to Japan. But I've been to Narita and Hinata. If I had to choose between the two, I would probably lean a little bit towards Hinata or Haneda, excuse me, because Mount Fuji is not that far. And
Right.
I never forget when I took off from Haneda Airport and just right outside my window, Mount Fuji was right there. And
Fuji-san.
it was like early in the morning, and it was like the clouds were kind of like still hovering beneath Mount Fuji, but you could just see it from far away. And I literally took that as an omen. I was like, this lets me know I am coming back, and
That's
I am
right.
coming back for more.
It
But
gets into your blood.
yeah, yeah, and that's why, to kind of bring it back home and everything, that when you become a true practitioner of SYSBM, you literally remove yourself from the black box. And so I never forget the conversation that me, Kitagakure, and a non-black man we had on the back end, and a non-black man made the mention that, well, you guys have been removed from the community for years now, so you're considered as outsiders. And the more I thought about the words he said, the more it made me realize that
He's
actually,
absolutely right. He was
yeah,
correct. I had that same thought. I was like, man,
yeah, and I'm thinking to myself, like, honestly, it's been decades since I really immersed myself in the black box. Now, sure, years ago, I would sometimes think, as far as black issues and everything, but as of right now, 2020, I just don't really care about all things ebony related. And,
mm,
some will say, he self hate, he hate himself. And you know what? I'm not here to win friends. I'm not here to be likable and everything. It just is what it is. I have found a culture that lines up with my beliefs. And really, when you think about globalism, that is the beauty of it. You can now connect with people from all across the world who share the same mindset as you do. And for us, Japan is just that mindset.
absolute facts. Yeah, that's a good point because yeah, I took away that conversation. I was like, you know what? He's absolutely right. And then after that, shortly thereafter, the whole story about the National African American Museum white culture thing came up, you know, self gratification or delayed gratification, thinking logically, having a family, blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, crap. I'm an Oreo. I'm a hashtag dark white. You know what I mean? I'm like, why am I running away from it? And I was just like, I mean, because really, I hadn't really been thinking about following the typical stuff, what I mean, that community uplift forklifts. But then I was just like, man, you know what, bug it. It is what it is. I'm just a loaning out here doing this thing, trying to get with the like-minded. And as we move into this 21st century, you've got the race men that are still on um, that ebony mindset. They're about that. They want to resurrect it. They're circling the wagons. They're doing this, that, and the third. I'm like, well, y'all can be over here doing that. We gonna be over there on a plane doing something different. So
Exactly. And I'm just gonna put this out there. Every time I hear the word we need to uplift, I go back to my weightlifting days of high school and college where I have to wear a weightlifting belt just so I can crank out those, one max and everything. I'm just gonna be honest. I am not gonna be uplifting an individual that outweighs me by at least 100 pounds, which
a
means I
kill, a
have to
kill, a kiloton.
which means I have to wear a weightlifting belt, and I don't want to go back to that. So,
Well, if you like Mayuko with her long, luxurious, natural black hair and her lighter skin tone, you're going to be labeled as a texturist, a colorist, a featurist. You're going to be accused of internalized racism and, just all these stupid talking points. It's dumb. And the only reason why they spit all that is that basically they don't believe that a black man should be happy. That's really what it comes down to.
yep, yep. Which actually now leads to the meat of this episode.
The
So,
meat.
so lately, definitely I want to get head started into the ways of the shinobi and the ways of the samurai, because I think for both of us, because we are entrenched in the Japanese culture from a lot of aspects, for any brothers out there who is definitely interested in being more into the Japanese culture and not just otaku, anime people and all, which nothing wrong with anime and everything. I definitely, during my spare time, I prefer to watch Japanese TV and Japanese shows more so than American shows because I just relate to it better. But I think a lot of brothers would do themselves a disservice if they think that all of Japan is all about what they see on anime. And for me, you know, when I was young, I've talked about this many times before, where my grand uncle who served in the Pacific War and he fought against the Japanese, he had a chance to go and visit there. And from a young age, that's what really inspired me to learn more about Japan. It's only like when anime came later on that's like, oh, these are some cool shows and whatnot. But from a small little boy, I already had it made up in my mind that this particular place and culture, I want to go see it for myself. And as the years gone by, went to college, met authentic Japanese people there, made friends with them, and then finally took a trip over there. It was like it all came full circle. And now it took me to another level to where, okay, I actually want to become part of this. And from there's where, a friend recommended me to do taiko drumming and, drum with my sensei who is from Nagoya in that region. And, now once this COVID is done and everything, I'm actually going to start going into the actual training process of a samurai. dealing with the katana, the meditations, the aspects of really thinking the way of a samurai in modern times. To me, that's what lets me know that this is what true Japanese is all about. And even in the ways of the shinobi like yourself, you're more connected to Japan than anybody who based their ideas of Japan just based off of anime.
That's a great point. Actually, just today I was watching Goblin Slayer because they had like a kind of like a OAV that they added. I was a huge fan of the series. They added like a special. I was watching that, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, like in my house, we watch primarily Asian, so Korean or Japanese media. And the reason for that is primarily because I can't really find anything that's mentally challenging and stimulating. And it also is, appropriate for kids in the US. I mean, here in the West, you have to like look at everything to make sure that, they're not trying to brainwash your kids with this, that, and the third. You know what I'm saying? So you got to be really careful about that. But for me, it's been an interesting journey, and not to rehash because I think we talked about this like maybe in the first or the second Black Loaning show. But my relationship with anime has, it's been an ongoing thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I was really sick, and I couldn't leave the house, so I started watching Lanma One Half, and to this day, that's still my favorite anime. I've got like not all of them, but most of the manga, most of the video series. You get the idea.
I'm
But
actually rewatching Rama One Half as we speak.
is that right?
Oh yeah, it's on Hulu. So for those that like Rama
Suge.
One Half, it's on Hulu. So definitely get a chance to watch it. I recommend that too.
Yeah, man, that's what's up. We bros. See, this is what I'm talking about, the like-mindedness, because yeah, I mean, like, so I started learning Japanese because I wanted to know what they were saying. And, the study eventually led to, and then I wanted to actually train at the same time. So, but I went to a few different schools, and I didn't really find one that really fit me until I basically met my ninjutsu instructor on an elevator, and I thought I was tough back then. He was like, "Oh, okay, come to my school." And then after basically 2 hours of getting thrown around the dojo, I basically became his disciple, and I've been training ever since then. So what I found was that my ninpo didn't improve until I accepted that ninpo is a Japanese art, and that I have to. It's built for Japanese bodies, and there's a lot of culture. There's a cultural context behind it that makes your techniques more effective or not. Like if you're an American, you just try to power through everything, it doesn't work. In fact, one of my biggest challenges back then was to basically learn how to relax and just basically let the technique work without me trying to force it. So when I basically, learn more about Japanese culture and habits and customs and history, the better my ninpo got. My martial art technique actually improved quite a bit because of it.
Absolutely. And speaking of ninjutsu, that actually goes to our topic where I have an article that talks about the mindset of the ninja. And this particular article, it was interesting to read because I think with you being a shinobi, you would actually relate more so with the type of mindset this article talks about. And I definitely wanted to get your input on it as you're a shinobi. And so, what better way to understand the ways of a shinobi than an actual shinobi? So,
All right, getting to the meat of the video.
yes, yes. So, this is an article from Black Belt, and it was published back in May of 2014. It's titled Way of the Ninja Strategies for a Better Life Today. And so it starts off by saying this: tree climbing and throwing stars aside, ninjutsu encompasses principles of psychological self defense that even the military uses. Such valuable skills are readily available to you. Start changing your design for living right there. So it says, centuries ago, the art of ninjutsu was born into a world enveloped in war. One fact, makes it vastly different from styles like Aikido and the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which were founded during peacetime. Because of its violent childhood, ninjutsu matured into a system that focused on fighting methods that worked on the battlefield, behind enemy lines, and against multiple attackers. The art grew to encompass principles for psychological self defense that enable its adherents to live out their lives on their own terms, free from fear. Those same principles are now used by military personnel around the world, even though they probably don't know where the teachings came from. Because we all face adversity, granted, it may not be as severe as that experienced by a black clad warrior 500 years ago or an army ranger today, ninja wisdom is just as valuable in the 21st century as it ever was. Good sir, your thoughts on this before we continue?
All right, a lot of ground to cover. Firstly, Aikido and Ninpo have a very interesting connection. So the founder of Aikido, Ueshiba Sensei, I believe that's what his name is. He actually, and there's various versions of the story, but he either trained with or was a student with possibly Takumatsu Sensei, who was basically where the Bunjinkan lineage basically springs from him. So basically, they either were co-students or they were contemporaries. But basically, I think that when we talk about Aikido, Aikido is basically the softer version of Aki Jiu-Jitsu. And those guys, they can mess your stuff up. Like if you want to know like hardcore samurai battlefield arts, Aki Jiu-Jitsu will help you in that regard. So teachers will basically have the version that is kind of built for discipline and for remembering and passing down the techniques and things like that. But most of the time, those higher levels, they have kind of the war scroll. They have the combat scroll that they don't really teach that much, but they're there. They're kind of lurking in the background. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that basically is pure technique. Because we all know that jiu-jitsu was, of course, a samurai skill.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what the Gracies did is they basically they modified it. And I'm trying to think who they learned it. I think the elder Gracie learned it from a gentleman by the name of Kano. He was like a wandering Japanese fighter type. I mean, the story behind Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is pretty interesting too. So what I don't like a lot of times in these kind of articles, and I understand why they do it, there's a lot of similarities between these various fighting arts. So a lot of the shinobi were actually defeated samurai. And JJ says Mitsuyo Maeda. I think that might be right. I'm trying to remember like the details of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but whoever he learned it from was basically like an undefeated Japanese fighter. He was supposedly a really kick butt kind of guy. So, you had a lot of samurai that basically they would lose the battle, lose the war. They would flee to Iga or to other areas. They would basically train like Luke Skywalker, and then they would basically come back and start their lives as shinobi. So my young Hinata's immediate area, there was on one of my videos on my channel, I talked about the Shoninki.
Mm.
And the shinobi behind that particular work, he was also from a samurai family, and his particular dojo was ninjutsu was basically like the capstone of that particular clan's samurai training. So you have kind of the story of shinobi and samurai being these two separate things. Sometimes they were, but oftentimes there was kind of a free flow of information, especially when you consider that a lot of the shinobi, the heads of these ninja clans, oftentimes they had multiple identities, like the Sandaios and the Hanzos and those guys. So who's to say that, a guy that was known as a pretty famous samurai had a shinobi alter ego, like the Yagyu family? I mean, that was their whole claim
Oh
to fame,
yeah.
that, they were an actual shinobi family, but they put on that kind of that samurai exterior because you really didn't know. The line, the Sengoku Jidai area, the age of the country of war, alliances were shifting. People were getting paid under the table. Alliances would rapidly devolve into chaos. So yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, um, the idea that these particular arts were these completely separate things is not accurate all the time. And the shinobi arts are especially hazy because they were a secret organization. They weren't advertising online or anything like that back in the old days. So there's that.
Yeah, I agree too. To me, a lot of it is something because even my sensei will say that, well, my Taiko sensei, he would tell me that a lot of aspects of Japanese life, from those of a blacksmith or a wood chopper or someone who even makes mochi, a lot of their techniques can be traced back to martial arts, which includes you know the uh, uh, the aikido and like you mentioned the Brazilian jiu-jitsu and other aspects of it. So it's really all connected in some form of fashion. Like even when I was first starting off as a taiko drummer, one thing that my sensei told me is that when you're beating the drum, you want to, as you pointed out, you want to be as relaxed and let the techniques follow through. And then when you strike the drum, you always aim at a focal point within the face of the drum. In other words, you're not trying to waste any movement.
Yeah.
And at the time, trying to transition from the American drumming to taiko drumming, it was definitely not easy because now you're really trying to focus on not wasting moves, but at the same time being relaxed. And what kind of helped me bring it all together is my sensei said it's the technique you're learning is the same type of technique that any samurai or shinobi would use when doing self-defense. And that's when it all clicked. It's like, huh. So he's actually teaching me a fighting style, but at the same time, it's incorporated in a form of drumming. So yeah, I'm with you that there's a lot of aspects of Japanese fighting styles that, sure, on the outside they don't look the same or they don't have any references of each other, but they are all interconnected. Um, if you really dig deep on the history of those techniques.
And I wanted to point out too, because they mentioned the black clad warrior. Well, as we know, that black clad costume actually came from kabuki.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So a shinobi would dress like a mochi maker or a priest or a wandering ronin.
Yeah.
So they call it the shichi hode, the 7 ways of going. And so, like you mentioned with taiko, what better way to to train without being observed if you basically make it like capoeira, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
the whole idea was, you didn't want Massa to find out that you were actually training to take him out. So that's where the shinobi have this idea of truth and falsehood. You kind of play with that. Yes, you're a taiko drummer, but you're more than that. Or you're a shinobi, but you could also pose as a taiko drummer. Basically, like they mentioned, the psychological warfare part. And I want us also, before we move on, I want to talk about, he says, basically, you know, the adherents live their life on their own terms. And this is why I think I'm so adamant about SYSBM. That's why I'm
Mm-hmm.
so adamant about what it is that we're doing, because I had it instilled in me that if you do the right things, you can live your life without fear, be it in a combat situation, be it in the boardroom or the bedroom. Sometimes they say love is always a battle, right? uh, Maybe that's another Black Ronin of Japan conversation. We talk about the shiju hate. But anyway, um, so the dojo, and there's a lot of dojoisms. One of the dojoisms is that basically you should feel comfortable equally in the middle of nowhere or in a 5-star hotel. um,
Mm.
it shouldn't bother you. There are no surprises for the shinobi.
Very
Always
it.
be prepared for whatever comes at you. So when I hear people coming at us with these arguments, I'm like, why would I believe that? It doesn't make any sense for me to believe that, because obviously you're trying to use your words to get me to destroy my life, or whatever. So the more I trained, the more I kind of understood what this thing was about. The less susceptible I was to any sort of outside influence.
Very interesting. Well, definitely reading up on the next section, I'll definitely going to highlight what you mean about, being comfortable in other environments and how this ties in with SYSPM. Like, I don't know if the odds have caught on, but the Japanese culture in and of itself definitely oozes SYSPM. And me and my co-hosts are trying to get brothers out there who wants to learn more about the Japanese culture. Like, we're literally kind of giving you some secrets about this Japanese culture in this way. But definitely let me read on to kind of give more of what I'm talking about. So the next section says, you cannot control your environment, but you can control yourself. At the foundation of ninjutsu lies the basic understanding that you have little to no control over your attackers, whether they're physical, psychological, or emotional sources of stress. To waste time fretting, panicking, or denying the truth of the circumstances is to invite frustration or failure. The inhabitants of the ninja villages in Japan's Iga province were attacked almost daily. Instead of wallowing in their misery, they prepped themselves to function in a fearful or stressful environment. Accounts abound of training sessions in which students ran through dark forests while their partners waited for an opportunity to effect a surprise attack. By mastering their breathing, their senses, and their awareness, they were able to function. What's more, they learned how to remain relaxed under stress.
Uh-oh, I mean, if I didn't hear that once, I heard it 1,000 times.
Oh, yes.
Stay relaxed.
Yeah, even for me, taiko drumming, and believe me, it's something that I'm still getting used to, I'm still understanding. But my sensei will always tell me, don't force yourself on the drum. Let the mind flow slowly, and then strike when the opportunity is there.
Mm.
In other words, just relax and let the technique do its job.
Yeah. And when you think about technique, so if you're looking at now, I admittedly I don't know a tremendous amount about the history of taiko, but I'm pretty sure there are some pretty old ancient arts behind it. So I'm pretty sure this statement applies. So when we talk about Nimpo, for example, the techniques that were handed down, basically, if you tried a technique on the battlefield and you died, then your technique died with you.
Yeah.
So basically, the techniques that you learn were the ones that actually worked under varying circumstances. So I didn't really have tremendous success until I learned to relax. Bone alignment, in other words, like using your skeleton, your skeletal is that the word I'm looking for? Skeletal system, like using that in a way to basically eliminate the need for power. And then also like correct technique, like footwork and distancing.
Hmm.
Using your body, like you're not trying to beat people up with your arms, you want to put your whole body behind it. I'm pretty sure that's the same thing when you're drumming. So it will work. And I think actually, this might be in a bit of an aside, but sometimes I'll watch YouTube videos where like people who are primarily strikers,
Hmm.
like they'll get their butt kicked. Like they'll be trading blows and then all of a sudden they get swept or taken down or whatever, and then they just get mauled on the ground. And we saw that all throughout old school USC, right? I mean, the Gracies came in there and they messed everybody up. And they were like, "Who are
Hmm.
these guys?" So I'm thinking that part of the issue is that um, this is why in the Shinobi world we don't have like kumite, we don't have tournaments, because in order for my technique to work, I either have to really injure you or I have to kill you. Those are really the only two situations where it's going to work. Because if I'm not putting the proper power behind it, or if I'm holding back on my technique, or I'm hesitating in some way, it's just not going to work. I'm just going to get punched in the face, and then you're just going to, leg sweep me or shoot the guard or whatever people are saying nowadays. Because I haven't really kept up with the MMA scene, but if you're going to use that stuff, you're going to have to let loose. And if you let loose with a jutsu art like jujitsu or akijutsu or ninjutsu, then you're going to hurt people. They're going to be crippled. They're going to be dead. That's pretty much how that works. So, like JJ is saying, ninjutsu stresses quick battles. Um, Depending on the circumstances. So there's a whole series of techniques where, like, you've got a guy guarding something. There's like a whole bunch of techniques in terms of how to take out a sentry without him really having an opportunity to do anything. So that, I guess, is a quick battle. There's other situations where basically you're leading the opponent, as they say, to his own destruction. Like you're not really doing much. And you have to really see it to understand it. They're doing all the work. They're throwing the punches. Your fist just happens to be ramming into their face. I mean, it's the craziest thing. So it just depends on the situation. But well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you are a striker and you're worried about not hurting someone, or you have to worry about where your blows are going, I mean, you're going to be at a disadvantage. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I agree too. It's just something because I actually talked to one of my Japanese friends who actually does MMA, and he was telling me that most Japanese who are really serious in their craft, um, as far as like their martial arts and all, they're not really too into doing MMA. And the reason being is because their techniques, like you just rightfully pointed out, it's designed to quickly get rid of your enemy within a small amount of moves. So it's not about toying with your opponent and so to speak trying to see who has the greater strength and everything. No, their techniques are fully designed to where you attack the vital points, kill your enemy, and then move on. And so when he was explaining that to me, it's like, yeah, that actually explains why you don't really see a lot of true martial artists being involved in something like MMA. Because for them, they take their craft very seriously. And even just having a slight regression in like holding back and everything could not only injure themselves but injure others. So yeah, I didn't really see it that way until he explained it, but even just hearing it being reiterated from your standpoint, it's like, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, really, like if you Google Masaaki Hatsumi Soke, if you watch him move, you can't learn from him because he is basically on God level. Um, he will destroy you and not do much. You just find yourself on the receiving end of a punch, a kick, a sword strike, whatever. You really don't know how you got there. And then at higher levels, they have Saminjits, which is basically like thought, word, and deed. Like you can paralyze people. I mean, it's like really kind of esoteric stuff. And a lot of that doesn't really translate well to a ring, and it doesn't translate well to rules. Now, with that said, though, I do think that there would be some value to be gained from, say, an MMA or a tournament situation, in that you don't want to go the other direction where you're like so stylized, and you don't have the pressure that you can't really execute either. That's not good either. But I mean, really high level people, it's not going to work for them unless they just have complete freedom of movement. And sometimes that's really limited because you don't want to hurt people, like, if it's not required. So, and then, I mean, the other thing, kind of going back to the psychological, when I was growing up, I grew up in a single mother household, and I saw that my maternal and my maternal and paternal grandparents were living very well, living very neat. And I realized that I was not living well, and I was not living neat. And I say, you know what? Guns, drugs, and rock and roll. I don't see this as a thing over there when I go over to grandmama's crib. And so I said to myself, this environment sucks. And I thought about, okay, well, how can I get out of this environment? How can I put myself in a position of maximum safety and advantage without giving away what I'm doing? I don't want to open up any holes for anyone to attack me. I want to be on top of the hill without anyone really knowing. Because, see, when you fight people, they fight you back.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you don't give them anything to fight, then they won't resist you, and you win. So Ninpo, in a lot of ways, even in the old days, right, the job of a shinobi was to gather and report information. So, like we talked about Bushido, your job was to serve your lord and to die if called for. A shinobi's job was to live. He had to stay alive because he was usually carrying information that was absolutely vital for the mission, the army, the lord, whatever. Um, Killing people, unlike, the movies are like, the ninja are like killing everyone, and 50 bodies are laying on the ground. But if you're killing someone, you're bringing attention to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Really, what you want is to work with nature, work with the flow of reality to where you basically are not seen, noticed, or detected until the job is done, whatever that job happens to be. So the physical techniques, supplement the mental and the spiritual, but there are, we all know about the Kuji Kitty and, the hand signs and all that. A lot of that was psychological to kind of put you in the right frame of mind. But on a certain level, the master shinobi would diligently practice not being observed, not being seen, hidden in plain sight. You don't know who he is. You don't know what his intentions are. Those are the things that they really focused on pretty heavily.
Boy, this has SYSBM written all over it. Like,
It's
I,
exactly.
I'm just listening to the background. It's just like, oh my goodness, this perfectly describes how most brothers, even brothers who don't claim SYSBM but live the lifestyle, we share this same mindset. And even
Yes,
later on, when we talk about some of the stuff of the samurai and everything, it still resonates with how many brothers just conduct themselves. See, you got detractors, especially here on YouTube, who will have you to believe that you won't get attention unless you're just some loudmouth, out of this world type of figurehood or figurehead, excuse me. And I'm telling them, it's like, most brothers who actually are true practitioners at SYSBM, we love working behind the scenes. We don't try to bring attention to ourselves, especially unnecessary attention, because we rather just, have our plans on the back end, follow through with our plans, and then let you know what we did when those plans come to fruition,
yes,
which pretty much encompasses how the shinobi pretty much go about their business. Like, it's
yes.
amazing.
Yes, that's exactly it. And the thing is, like when they talk about the environment, so oftentimes, so there is a kind of a mystical side to it, and most people refer to it as Nimpo Mikyo. So it's like an esoteric form of Buddhism. And like J.J. Wilson, he'll have what is it, Neo and other games on his channel. And a lot of that stuff that they're utilizing, well, not a lot of it, but some of it is employing Ninpo Mikyo. It translates to the secret teachings. So they have basically the Kongokai and the Taizokai. So these are famous Buddhist mandalas. But what they use it for is there's basically a God's eye view. If you're looking down from the perspective of God, what do you see? Big picture thinking. Then there's the other side of it where you're looking at it from the perspective of man. You're looking out at your environment from a man's eye view. What do you see? And basically, you kind of learn to flip back and forth between these particular perspectives. There's yin and yo, which is yin and yang. So yin and yo is used for a lot of things, but yin and yo are, for me, what I really got out of it was that the universe is on a big, massive time clock. So is it time for yin or is it time for yang? Things might suck now, but they will always flip over to the inverse. So you're not trapped in the situation where it's hopeless, nothing will ever change, blah, 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 because the universe is already starting to turn the clock back to where things need to be. People are taking independent actions to bring, for lack of a better word, balance back to the force. That's the best way I can explain it as. But you are a part of the process. So my job is to basically go with the flow of reality and aid things along, push things along, without you really noticing me doing it at that time. I'm just a black guy in a hoodie walking down the street. You don't know that I'm this or I'm that, or that I'm a shinobi, or that I've got this or that going on. You'll never know. I'm just some black guy on the street. But in reality, I'm working to bring about my particular goal, or the goals of my house, or whatever the situation is. I'm looking to bring that into fruition. And I know that basically, like the expression, do you know what time it is? Or, he don't know what time it is. If I know what time it is on the universal time clock, I'm not going to do stupid stuff that goes against the flow of reality. I'm hoping that makes sense. So from a SYSBM standpoint, no one can tell me that I need to support this community because I know that they are out of time. You can't tell me differently. Time is up. Now, maybe in 100, 200, however many years, the clock will come back, the pendulum swing back. We'll get back to a yang or a yo status where things are positive. But I'm not going to be around to wait on that. I'm going to keep it moving. Hopefully that makes sense. So instead of basically saying, woe is me and this environment sucks and there's nothing I can do, the shinobi of old were saying, okay, well, what powers can we tap into to make this work? And this is where you get the image of shinobi as a wizard, as a tengu demon, as a magician, ninja magic, all that stuff. It's basically, how can I flow with current reality in an effortless way that is unnoticeable? Easier said than done, but that's kind of the essence that they're talking about. Instead of like banging their heads against, the machine, the shinobi of old basically said, okay, well, how can we find the personal power to make this work? And they looked inside and they found that personal power. And that is where ninjutsu came into being.
Soka.
Ronins.
Boy, I tell you, it makes complete sense for me, and that's maybe because we're both on the same wavelength. But for audience out there who may not understand the dynamics that me and Kirigakure are talking on, I just highly recommend do your own research, have your own experience, and who knows, you may be on the same wavelength as us both. But with that said, let's continue on. It says, these days, sources of stress take on many forms. Daily challenges may not become real psychological or emotional threats until they start to snowball. It's not an expensive car repair, you might say. It's just that I need the car to pick up my cousin at the airport tomorrow. It wouldn't be a big deal, but with my reduced hours at work, just like the ninja of old, we can't control our environment, but we can control ourselves. Remember to keep breathing, smile, and never lose your 360 degrees of awareness. You've no doubt read countless articles that explain the concept of tunnel vision. Frustration, fear, and anger can narrow your awareness to the origin of those emotions, which could be your attacker. As a result, you're exposed to the possibility of multiple assailants. Like I said, this article really had SYSBM written all over because the concept just from that article could definitely apply to any brother who thinks outside of the black box. And it can be overwhelming if you allow people who think within the black box to infiltrate your mindset.
And, to add to that, see, the thing is, and this is a bit difficult because, we came up with the idea of my respect, put some respect on my name, put some respect, I got the juice or whatever, right? Because for a black man, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't want to get jumped, if you don't want to get beat down, if you don't want to get shot, you got to let these people know, hey man, don't mess around, man. I'm not a punk, I'm not a mork. However, combat is the last resort for the shinobi. Because remember, the ninja's job is to gather and report information. The
Mm-hmm.
shinobi's job is to come back alive, not dead. So that means that people may disrespect you, people may call you names, people may humiliate you or try to humiliate you. So that's where the concept of Ninpo no Kokoro or Shinobi no Kokoro, the happy heart. So you have to understand that no matter what happens, you have to kind of keep the lights, the truth in your heart, even if you're plunging into the darkness. Like
Very.
in our online career, people are constantly calling us names and they're saying horrible things about us, and they want to dox, they want to threaten, they want to do this, they want to do that. But we don't respond to any of that because it ultimately is irrelevant.
Yeah.
So the emotions like the fear and the anger, as part of that looking inside, what are we going to do to stay alive, basically. To do that, you're going to have to basically, instead of pushing away your fear or suppressing your anger, you basically have to work with it. You have to accept it. You have to channel it, meaning that you accept that you're angry, but you basically have the presence of mind, the dispassion to redirect it. I like to think about it because, when I was training heavily in Mikyo, one of the things that, you do, you sit down and you draw the breath. And one of the things is, the emotions kind of come into your mind like rainstorms. It's a bright day, and then the
Mm-hmm.
rain clouds come in, and it starts raining and thunderstorming, but then the clouds go away, and the sun comes back out. So that's basically the way that, the shinobi has to deal with their emotions. They're not trying to suppress the emotion. They're not trying to block the emotion. You let the emotion come, you redirect it, and then you let it go because it will go away. You may be angry right now, but you won't be angry forever. You may be sad right now, but you won't be sad forever. You may be happy right now, but you won't be happy forever. So these emotions are the fuel, are the catalyst. So you basically learn how to use alchemy, if you will, to transmutate the emotion. Because if you're like, you know, the samurai is investigating you because he suspects you're shinobi and you punch him in the face, you may not go home that day. That's not your job. Your job is to go home and share the information, share the
Mm-hmm.
intel. So, I mean, there's a lot of, and that requires sitting down, breathing, kind of understanding yourself at all levels. So people can call me whatever they want. It doesn't matter to me because I know what the truth is. I know that I have a happy heart. So I can go out here and do battle in this YouTube space and it doesn't bother me. When I click off the video or whatever, I go back to my regular life. So that's, I think, something that you work on. It's not something you immediately do. It takes time. The physical training gets your mind in order. You do your mental training, get your spirit in order. And then basically it kind of clicks. And then after that, you kind of naturally do it. It becomes a spontaneous thing. You stop having to consciously think about it. It's something that you do. It's a part of your personality. And of course, this makes the detractors and the opposition upset to, to no end, because now they can't push your buttons. They can't manipulate you.
Very true. Very true. And actually, the next subject or the next section here actually reiterates what you're
Jumping
talking
ahead.
about.
Okay.
No, not at all. I mean, you are the real shinobi in these parks. So, like I said, if you want to learn about a topic, go to the expert. In this case, we're learning about the ways of the ninja or the ways of shinobi. And what better way to learn about it than to have that verified and validated by a real shinobi, Kirigakane Jones. So, yeah, that was more deeply thought of than the actual article itself. But the next section actually pretty much goes right into what you're talking about. So, this next section says there's something to be learned from everything. The ninja referred to this principle as Shiken Hiramitsu Daikomyo, which roughly translates as every moment holds the potential for enlightenment.
Yeah. And that's where we do the Shikin Haramitsu Daikyomyo. And you bow and then you. Okay, sorry. Force it.
No. I'm good with that. It says the ninja's enemy enjoys superiority in numbers, weapons, and supplies. The ninja, however, realized there was one thing their enemies could not take away: their ability to learn something new from each encounter. This principle was embraced and eventually woven into the fabric of ninjutsu. The beauty of historical ninjutsu is that training and living were the same. The only thing that separated failure from lesson learned was the mindset of the person involved. They strive to take something new from each encounter and apply it during their next one. They never allow their egos to get in the way of revisiting that vital first stage of learning. Thomas Edison outlined this principle well. Quote, I have not failed 700 times. I have not failed once. I have succeeded in proving that those 700 ways will not work.
So, yeah, and this is where, personally, as the debates rage in various areas of YouTube, we all know that the arguments basically circle around like select, non-select, Pookie versus Ray Ray, game versus whatever. None of that matters to me, because basically I'm always seeking to put myself in a position of maximum safety and advantage. Because, in the old days, if you messed up, you die. Right? Death focuses the mind. And to be quite honest with you, if a black man in America makes the wrong move, he dies. This is why I always say that the black man is shinobi. You are a shinobi whether you realize it or not. You don't get infinite and multiple chances. You get one shot. And we all know that, friends and family, we know personally who screwed up and their lives are ruined. And I'm looking at people, dying, going to jail, all that kind of stuff, having a bunch of, kids, all that kind of stuff, just not making good decisions, and their lives were screwed. And I said to myself very early on, I said, I need a systematic method to avoid the pitfalls. And that's what ninjutsu will teach you. It will teach you to, number one, borrow any good idea from any source, from anybody, from any situation. I refuse to close myself off from knowledge because it comes from a certain person, a certain group, a certain country, or a certain era. Truth is truth, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to utilize that. I'm going to plug it in. The other thing is, I mean, you know, the shinobi of old. So I talked about this on occasion. There's faculties of mind. There
Mm-hmm.
is, in the Jungian sense, there's the logical, there's the emotional, there's the sensation like touch, taste, smell, etc., and there is the intuition. So people tend to get stuck in like one or two of these particular schemes. Some people are very emotional and very intuitive. Other people are very logical and very sensual. Well, if you are stuck in one polarity or another, you're going to die. Everything that the shinobi do revolves around the understanding that failure equals death. And, you know, on a higher level, though, like the secret phrase of the Togakure school is basically what is it? The highest goal of the Togakure school is to protect family, country, and nature.
Hmm.
That's the secret teaching of the Togakure school. So at a higher level, like we talked about in the Bushido video, at the highest levels, your motivation is love. You can't die because people you love are depending upon you. You can't fail because your quality Stargate needs you, your kids need you, right? So, like Naruto, I love that series because they've captured a lot of the shinobi ethos. So, for example, some people would say, you know, why is Naruto so obsessed with Sasuke? Why was he trying to get Sasuke back? You know, were they lovers? You know, people would look at it and make stupid comments like that. But no, what that is the expression of bonds of love can motivate you to be invisible. It can motivate you to do these things. So on the one hand, there is, of course, you don't want to die, but on the higher level, you're doing it because there are people, nation, nature, you know, that you really love and care about. So
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, at the highest level, it's about love, which is kind of ironic, seeing as how the shinobi have such a, I would say, a reputation for being, you know, cold-blooded killers, but that's pretty much the motivation. Yeah.
Soka, Soka. It is something you mentioned earlier about, you know, learning from others' experiences.
Yeah.
Now, I'm pretty sure you've heard this saying from our detractors, especially some individuals here on YouTube, where they'll be like, no matter where you go, you're going to experience a Negro moment sooner or later.
Hmm.
And I think to myself, like, okay, if I was looking for that, a Negro moment, sure, I think I can find it pretty much anywhere. But that's the thing. Like the earlier comment says, you can't control your environment, but you can control yourself. In other words, there's a famous quote that says, only 10% of life happen out of happenstance. 90% is based off of how you react. So for me, this principle on the basis of learning from others' experiences, I mean, to me, that would just make any person just a lot better overall. Not just, you know, being a black man in America, because I look at some of these situations that they portray on the media and whatnot, and I'm diverging a little bit, but it all ties in. And yes, some of these circumstances that we see on the media of some of these brothers being shot and killed and everything, no, they all did not deserve to die. I would definitely say that. But as a person who is starting to really dig deep and learn from others' experiences and all, the question I always ask myself is what led up to that experience? And I can definitely say 99% of the time, the victims, and I know some people may not like to hear this, but it's the truth. The victims done something that drew unnecessary attention. And that's just something to where when I look at circumstance, it's like, okay, well, if I don't do X, Y, and Z, the chances of me running into this similar situation is very, very slim. And like you pointed out, right, so the way of the shinobi, if you don't learn from others' failures, it's life or death. And so for many brothers today, life is, I'm just going to come out and say it, life is not that severe as it was with the shinobis. But you can definitely help yourself by looking at others' experience and saying, maybe I shouldn't do X, Y, and Z. Because if you do X, Y, and Z, bring this unnecessary stress, this unnecessary attention, and I don't want to deal with that. So as long as I don't do X, Y, and Z, I think I'm pretty good. And majority of the time, when you follow your gut instincts, you're usually proven correct.
I mean, that's a good point. So there's a few ways to handle that. So if it's a situation where you've done the homework and there's a pretty high probability, and that's another part of the kind of the shinobi worldview, you're weighing, it's a calculated risk. What is the risk of this happening? Well, if I felt like that, there's a pretty good opportunity for me to be hurt or to be killed, if I go to this place, I just don't go. Like if someone showed up and said, hey, at 5 p.m. Pacific time on this date, I'm going to kill you. Well, a shinobi just wouldn't show up, right? Because you kind of know ahead of time. See,
you would think logically,
right?
Okay, somebody's saying they're going to kill me at 5 o'clock if I go to this place. I'm not going to even go there. But
right.
You will have people, especially those who think in the black box, that be like, oh, I ain't afraid of nothing. I'm going to show up and do this and everything. And it's like, Negro, why?
That's it. See, that's where, but like I said earlier, the training the body trains the mind and finally trains the spirit. So I don't have ego like that. I don't need to be tough or brave or strong. I mean, I'm those things, but I don't have to prove it to anyone else. Like if someone tried to break into my house to test me, well, they would get handled. It wouldn't be a big deal, but I'm not the one that's going to need to show up at 5 p.m. Pacific to get killed because of my pride. The same thing, like if we're talking about let's say I encounter the police and they want to lock me up. I haven't done anything wrong. The last thing I'm going to do is fight the police. I'm going to let them put the handcuffs on. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to let them transport me to jail. I'm going to call my attorney. Now, I can't control that ride, right? Maybe they take me in the backfield and, work me over real good before they throw me in lockup, But the probability that something bad would happen to me is greatly reduced because from a shinobi's mindset, I can't afford to be injured. I can't let myself be injured for no good reason. I have to try to avoid that if I can. If I do take the L, I take the L. I have to endure the pain. I just got to take that butt whooping. And then finally, yes, sir, no, sir. I like to call my attorney, sir. It's not, I'm not going to be cussing at him or anything like that. But to get there, you've got to, this is something that has to be cultivated. these are the attitudes and the mindset. So like I mentioned earlier, some people are stuck on the emotive or the emotion faculty, and they're set to emotion, and that's all they know. Well, a fully fledged shinobi that's in possession of all of his powers will spontaneously move to the area that he needs to move to at that moment in time. So for a full-fledged shinobi, it's a question of not what is right or wrong. It becomes a question of what is appropriate for the situation.
Well, it's funny you mentioned because this next and last section of this article literally encompasses exactly what you're talking about. So this next section says conditioning yourself will help you succeed in stressful environments. So it reads as follows. The third principle is one that separates martial artists from sports competitors, and it lies at the heart of ninjutsu. Bruce Lee reminded us that the best training for the event is the event. Separating excellent training from mediocre training can be challenging because we normally can't participate in the event we're training for. As explained above, however, the ninja were able to combine the actual event with their training, and they worked out a system for learning from each attack. A complete martial art trains you to remain comfortable in stressful or dangerous environments. To do this, it must push the boundaries of your comfort zone periodically to condition you to succeed under pressure. Modern practitioners of the art accomplish this in many ways: training with the lights off, defending themselves while wearing blindfolds or handcuffs, fending off multiple attackers, overcoming environmental obstacles, and diffusing verbal attacks. Remember that the goal isn't to eliminate fear, it's to remain comfortable in the face of fear and not be paralyzed by it.
Facts. Like, I want to add, so I want to focus in on we can't normally participate in the event we're training for, but you can do that through the mind. So for example, there's what's called the Godai method, right? So there's earth, water, fire, wind, and then at the highest level, you have ku, or the void. So on your body, as you cultivate the mind state or the feeling, you actually have a system of mudras. You put your fingers in certain poses. So, for example, you're meditating on earth. Earth is a stable, strong, mountain-like feeling. And when someone's attacking you, it's like like your little cousin is trying to hit you. What do you say to them? Stop, stop. It's like you're overpowering this person. They can't do anything to you. You are immovable like the earth, right? So you see the imagery there. So as you kind of sit in meditation, you basically touch your fingers. There's different hand poses for this, but basically the feeling carries over to your physical body through the hand pose. And then also, the various stances or kamae, postures, if you will. Each one of the postures has different elements or feelings associated with them. So there is a earth stance, there is a water stance, there's a fire, you get the idea. So basically in your mind, your body, and your spirit, you're cultivating this overwhelming sense of, I cannot be moved, I'm the mountain, that kind of thing. So you can rehearse the event by training. You also rehearse the event by, like I talk about sometimes in my videos, through affirmation, meditation, and visualization. So
Mm-hmm.
you're doing these things in your mind and your body. So if you put your fingers together in the earth mudra, you automatically feel the feeling of, that superior grounded energy comes rushing back to you. Or if you do the water mudra or the wind mudra, you get the idea. So there is a systematic process, not just the physical training, although you start with the body. You start with the body, then you go to the mind through the meditation and the visualization. Finally, all that gets locked into your spirit. So when you get to that ku level, that void level, again, you want to be spontaneous. You want to be in the correct pose at the correct time without having to think about it. You want to be effortless with it. So you're not in the right stance or the wrong stance, you're in the appropriate stance. So when, at very high levels, you're basically appropriate all the time. And the best example of what that looks like is, again, Soke Hatsumi. Just Google him, you'll see him. But basically, he embodies what Nimpo is. It is a spontaneous free flow of energy, and you don't know what is happening to you until such time as you're on the ground as a broken man. And on top of that, there are plenty of instances where, like, people will start the attack and then they just freeze up because he's using samanjits, and they just can't move. It's the weirdest thing you've ever seen. So I mean, all of this, of course, takes a long time, and there's a lot of cultivation behind it, but that's basically part of the shinobi arts. Now, there are things that I don't know that I haven't been taught, and then there are other things that apply to specific circumstances, like, for example, how do you engage someone in conversation to get the information you need? And salute to Logic's finest, says he's going to be riding a bike. So anyway, I mean, these lessons get applied very easily to your execution of SYSBM. This is why, personally, no one can move me from my path. No one can take me off my purpose. You can't really argue that, you can't convince me that SYSBM is not the way, because it is. It's basically a jutsu, just like ninjutsu, akijujutsu, yaya jutsu, any sort of kind of battlefield technique.
No doubt. I don't know, man. I was just lost in imagination when you was explaining all of that. Um, which to me, a practitioner of SYSBM can easily get lost in their mind. And it's fun, especially anything ties with Japan and whatnot. I truly enjoy this. And shout out to Logic's finest, that brother. All three of us have our conversations on the back end on esoteric stuff. Nimpo definitely has many elements of esoteric thinking. I mean, Kitagakane just broke it down to you where not many people will truly understand that. But
When I think
it
about
truly,
it, I think ninjutsu is weaponized esoteric skills. It's the military application, because the people who developed it, they didn't have a choice. They were like, okay, well, we gotta figure something out, or we're gonna die, or
yeah.
maybe worse than that, we got to figure something out, or my children will die, my village elders will die, right? So, I mean, that's a powerful motivation to make a way out of no way.
Yeah, very, very true. Which leads to the last article of tonight. So we're now going to shift from the shinobi way or the shinobi thinking to a modern samurai thinking, courtesy of a legendary samurai by the name of Miyamoto Musashi.
Oh,
And now
one of the
there's a
all-time greats.
oh yeah. So now this article that I've read, once again, it has SYSBM written all over it and all. But and a lot of the shinobi ways of thinking that we just read from the previous article, you're also going to see in, incorporated in this type of article as well. And that's why, like you mentioned earlier, Kirigakure, all of this is combined and have roots that are one and the same. So even though you're learning one type of teaching or one type of technique, and it's similar, it is not similar to other techniques or teachings, they all have roots that can be traced back to similar sources. And so this article is titled "A Samurai Master's 9 Rules for Success in Life." This was published 2 years ago, April the 3rd, 2018. And it says, one of ancient Japan's legendary warriors bequeathed a code for better living. It says, to the contemporary imagination, samurai warriors remain symbols of honor, courage, and discipline. These 3 qualities are desirable not only for the life dedicated to battle, but for existence itself. And this perhaps makes a look at them useful for any of the struggles we face, and on all of their many fronts. Beyond the samurai's warlike vision of life, there's no doubt that their code of conduct, which is Bushido, remains some remarkable and worthwhile teachings. At the end of the day, like many other attempts to govern human behavior, the samurai's manner of thinking and their methods reformed over time, oriented them towards the attainment of a certain ideal of life. And this was for the benefit of both the individual and the community.
Like a real community, right? Like a functional community.
Well, I put it like this, and I always believe this. Community first got to start with the man.
Yep.
And he deals with like-minded people
Right.
in his home. That's the bedrock of community. Then his home is shared with other like-minded people who share similar beliefs and mindset. And then when you group them together, now you have a community. But the difference here is you have a community that has beliefs that's not based on black and white standards.
Right.
Yeah. So we'll read the next topic. It says, among the most notable participants in the elaboration of the Samurai Code of Conduct was Miyamoto Musashi. In addition to handling the sword with fearsome mastery, he was also a philosopher and writer. He practiced calligraphy, which, by the way, even I'm starting to kind of get a little bit into it. I find it interesting that calligraphy, it has such a peaceful practice to it. And I'm still trying to get the hang of it, but it's actually a good way to kind of learn more about the Japanese language. So highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's very Zen-like, which is maybe a separate topic for another time. But yeah, I get that sense too. Kind of practicing the kanji and doing the brush strokes and everything else. So
My bad, my microphone fell. But yeah, that yeah. To me, that definitely going to be a topic coming up to where we focus on being able to have your mind at peace and being able to let the outside world deal with its issues and you rise above it. I know that's hard to believe, but it's very accomplishable. So next he says, he was a teacher to many young people and the author of treatises on the art of sword handling or military strategies, and to still others on the spirit of the life of the samurai warrior. It is also worth noting that Musashi was not a samurai as such, but A Ronin,
Ronin.
a term given to warriors who lost their masters either due to death or to a loss of favor. Now, later on, we will be doing episodes dedicated to Miyamoto Musashi, but I just want to definitely put that out there that yes, Musashi was a Ronin. And the mere fact that this man literally came up with techniques of sword fighting that to this day has his own type of school and dojo. It's very amazing.
Yeah, he's pretty amazing. Plus, I remember the old school Musashi series with Toshiro Mifune sama.
Mm-hmm.
So that was always, and I've read the Golden No Show, the Book of Five Rings. I've read that a few times. Every time I read it, I'm like, wow, okay, this makes sense. Wow, this relates. Wow, Anyway,
No problem. So next it says, within the philosophy of this legendary warrior, one of the fundamental principles is the necessary union between the student and the technique. Like the bulb and the flower, or excuse me, like the bulb and the flower, one cannot exist without the other. By itself, this is already a great lesson. It reminds us that in life, learning never stops. That each of us,
learning never stops. That's what my grandmother told me a long time ago. And I took that to heart. And to this day, I'm always trying to learn something new. And unfortunately, this is something that is not encouraged in certain areas. So, we have to become loaning and travel to areas where this kind of thing is encouraged.
exactly. And it's something you mentioned because we have some detractors who will say that the warriors of their community, they're the top of the class because they have learned the ways of the streets, and so they are better prepped to protect than the so-called educated lames. And I shake my head and I say to myself, yeah, the educated lames are actually light years beyond what the streets could teach you. And the reason being is because, like you rightfully said, we never stop learning. Like me and you right now, we talk on so many subjects in our respective channels in regards to the things that interest us. Besides, the things of Japan and the culture from it all, the topics that we talk about and the things that interest us the most, the reason being is because we are constantly in a learning loop and we enjoy being in that loop. Because as long as the mind is expanding, you're not going to be able to deter us or be able to catch us off guard with the frivolous things in life because you're still thinking in the black box. For us, we are beyond the black box. We're literally thinking on a universal, about to take over the world type of standard of living. I
That's
just want to
right.
put that out there.
No, you're exactly right. So, nowadays, I mean, I hear these arguments and I kind of yawn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because because I feel like, okay, well, um, they say these things, but how are they living? What's that quality of life look like? I'm not sure if it's on the same level as ours. And, I mean, basically, we structure our lives in such a way that the danger doesn't show up. I mean, ultimately, like thinking about Musashi, your typical shinobi would probably not get within 50 feet of him, at least, not in a threatening manner. You kind of have
Mm-mm.
to recognize, like, man, this guy, he's taking out like 100 people. Maybe we need to leave him alone. So you're just not there. When the beef starts, or when the back and forth is happening, and all that, you're just not there. You're in a totally different world than these people, and that's just the way it is. I mean, I didn't deal the cards, but that's just what it is. And um, where they are and where we are is just never the twain shall meet.
Yeah, exactly. And to reiterate more on that last sentence, it says it reminds us that in life, learning never stops. That each of us never stop being an apprentice to the skill of living. Key word, the skill of living. And that therefore the technique of living, work in progress, which can always be improved.
And the arrogance of the opposition is they think that they figured it out. They think that they have all the answers, and
Oh yeah.
they think that there's no other way but their way. But when we proclaim that SYSBM, this is the way, it's because we look at a wide variety of different people. We're looking at the Greco-Roman classics. We're looking at you know biblical Quranic texts. We're looking at the pyramid texts. We're looking at writings from every era, the great thinkers of past and present. I mean, we've analyzed and we've ingested enough material to know that yes, this is indeed the way. Whereas these other guys, some of these guys have never left their block.
Oh no, you got individuals who have been on their block since 1989
Right.
and have
Hanging
never
out at the
left.
same, you know what I mean? Just hanging out. I'm like, okay, well, can you tell me what's going on at the Lord, or can you tell me what happened in the Mali Empire? And, they can barely, they can't really tell you that. But they tell you that, we've got the proper way of living, and they refuse to improve. And unfortunately, sadly, there's a lot of people that are getting absolutely spanked due to their refusal to improve. This beer bug situation, automation, artificial intelligence, people are leaving the cities, and they're working from home. These are major shifts. You know what I mean? Like, think about what that means, right? So if you've got the warrior class over there on MLK Avenue, and they're the only people that live there, and everybody else is gone, and they're virtually networking and working and making money virtually, where does that leave the warrior class?
I guess you could say the warrior class are like modern day Ronins, but they serve a different master rather than
Hmm.
themselves.
And we know who that master is. We won't mention her name, though.
No, that master is pretty feisty, and for some reason, those guys, even when you show them that there's a better life outside of it, they unfortunately they're just stuck in that 20th century, like you pointed out in your video today.
Yeah,
That
they're stuck. I mean, some of these guys are stuck in ancient Kemet in 4000 BC. Now, granted, I enjoy reading about Kemet as much as the next person, but that was thousands and thousands of years ago. Can we kindly live in the now? Can we kindly deal with artificial intelligence and being creative and being refining your life? Can we work on that? But what do we know? We're lames according to them. So whatever.
yeah. Well, let's continue our constant learning since we're lames and whatnot.
Exactly.
So the next paragraph says, within the philosophy of this, actually, I just read that. It says the main work that comes down to us is the Book of the Five Rings. We will definitely be doing some shows on that too. Into which Musashi poured his strategic wisdom. It's said that to write the book, Musashi lived a life of an ascetic for almost 2 years, isolated in a cave on the island of Kyushu. And rest assured, I am going to be doing some Easter egg hunting on my trips to Japan. I already have one thing for this next trip when I'm back in Tokyo. I want to find the grave of the samurai who was the inspiration for Roni Kenshin. And then in Kyoto, in Osaka, but it's mainly in Kyoto, I want to go visit this tea house where, according to the legend of the 47 Ronin, the senior retainer, Kiranosuke, he actually spent some time at this tea house.
Oh yeah, he was like
Yeah.
when he was pretending to be a drunkard.
So and that's the beauty of places like Japan and other places outside of America. So many Easter egg hunts and everything. But Japan, there's a lot of them. So, stuff like this, Musashi staying on a cave in Kyushu to write the Book of the Five Rings. Yeah, that's on my list of places to look out.
I wanted to add to that too. So the word ascetic is someone who is in prayer, fasting, meditation, pushing themselves to the limit, training, things like that. So I mean, like for example, as a Orthodox Christian, we spend many weeks of the year fasting, many weeks of the year praying, meditation, throwing some training on top of that. Being an ascetic is not an easy thing. So that this work was a labor of love, literally, because he lived that particular lifestyle. That shows his maturity as a man, because we've got so many people. In fact, I always like to. So I've got a few people at the gig. They want me to be a manager because I've been there for a while and I'm good with people and all that kind of stuff. And I always jokingly say that I want to be like Miyamoto Musashi. I need to fight 50 duels in a war before I can actually be a manager. And I'm joking, but I'm also serious about that. So you've got people that should be in positions of influence and wisdom, but they're still living in their 20s or 30s, and they refuse to grow up, and they refuse to be an ascetic and cut off those unnecessary pleasures to produce something that's going to last for literally. When did he write that book? Trying to remember, like 1000, something like that. I mean, it's been around for a long time, basically, right? So I mean, there's so many parallels to what we're doing. SYSBM is not for every brother. SYSBM is tough.
It is.
Yeah, it's not easy at all. So anyway.
Very true. And shout out to Truth as I Know It.
Truth as I Know It. Salute to that brother.
I was recently on one of his panels earlier this week, and we had a ball talking about the new form of racism where they're literally trying to cloud black men into thinking that everybody's out to get him, not so much black people. And we had a pretty good conversation over there, me, him, and MOT. So definitely, if you get a chance, go over there to watch that particular show. But moving right along on the next paragraph here, it says, Musashi divided the work, as noted in his title, into 5 books, of which the first four are subtitled with the four fundamental elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. Now, I would have to say
Oh, so
that,
basically what I said earlier.
yeah,
Yeah.
and to be honest with you, like every time I see those books, I don't know why, but it just brings me to Earth, Wind, and Fire songs. Like,
Well, they had a
it,
lot of esoteric game in there too.
and they are
They had a lot of gems.
loved. They are loved in Japan. Like, I have some Japanese friends who literally that's all they listen to is Earth, Wind, and Fire songs.
Yeah,
And I would,
they're like their soul. Yeah, they like that. They like that. My roommate he was big into them too. I mean, it was crazy.
yeah, and I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to enjoy this country if if these people love Earth, Wind, and Fire. Like, I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. They're more black than blacks over here, but I digress.
Well, what's really interesting, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, I really think, honestly, I think that this whole thing, this BLM thing, I think this is really like a coordinated hit on our
Hmm.
image.
Oh yeah.
Because if you look at who's actually doing all this protesting, it's not us.
Mm-mm. And really, what kind of makes it sad is you have people from all across the world who, they're joining the protests of BLM, but they're only protesting because they actually care about black men. And when they
Yes.
see, the videos that come through internationally, like the George Floyds and whatnot, like they really are concerned for the well-being of black men. They
Mm,
just don't realize that the underlings of BLM is a lot more sinister than they would see.
right.
And that's why brothers like us, we're out here to really set the tone that, look, we don't need BLM to make us feel like we're valued. Like,
Right.
we have validation within ourselves.
Yeah.
And the people all across the world, they enjoy us for who we are. We don't
Mm.
need special laws or special privileges just to
Thank
be
you.
recognized. Like,
Thank you.
that's just my belief.
I'm with you. I mean, protect our rights, of course. Protect them. You know, uphold my rights. But yeah, I'm with you on that. So I just feel like this was like an orchestrated hit because too many brothers are making this choice. Too many brothers are embarking upon the path, and they're finding success, mad success. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just feel like it's all too very convenient because who's talking the most trash? It's not us.
Mm-mm.
It's the other side of the game. They're the one that's talking all this stuff. So anyway, I kind of digressed a bit. Go ahead,
Oh
sir. I'm sorry.
no. Oh no. It to me it all circles back. And there's nothing that offsets to the main topic, which, like I said, we are immersing in the Japanese culture, which is a culture, surprisingly, actually enjoys the essence of ebony men. So
Mm,
it all comes full circle. But the fifth book says that it closes the collection with the void.
with the void.
So, like I said, later on we will definitely do some episodes talking about the books of the five rings, because I'm of the belief, and in fact, I'm going to digress a little bit, but I actually kind of have like a future manga type of idea where you have five brothers, and these are actual brothers, who each represents one of the books of the five rings.
Uh-oh.
And
I see where you're going with that.
yeah,
It's
and
like
it's
Shaw Brothers all over again, the five elementals.
yeah, and it kind of have like a little twist of the samurai troopers, Ronin warriors shows and everything. But to me, this idea that I got going on, and I'm definitely, it's still a work in progress. But it's kind of like these 5 individuals, come from different certain aspects of life, and they were rejected, based on the fact that they come from different thinking and different viewpoints. But when they come together, they suddenly will understand their true calling, which come to find out they are reincarnations of certain warriors from the past. So just
Hmm.
be I'm throwing out there.
All right. Well, you know what? We maybe talk offline, but yeah, I do a little bit of writing, and maybe if we find the big thing would be to find an animator. But I think there's a few different studios out there um, that might fit the bill. But anyway,
Oh yeah, oh yeah. It was something I've actually been thinking about this for at least a good 3 to 4 years. Since I've been doing SYSBM, but now really getting more involved into the Japanese culture and Japanese lifestyle. You know, the idea just started to resurface, and a lot of these elements. Even like some kabuki plays and all. I'm just like, you know what? We can actually make like a SYSBM type of manga based
that's
off of
right.
these stories.
SYSBM
So,
Media. That's right.
so yeah, my mind was running adrift on that, but moving right along. So it says Musashi divided the work as no. Oh, we already read that. Next, it says at the end of the first book, dedicated to the Earth, Musashi wrote these 9 simple rules of conduct for the samurai warrior. Even in their brevity, they constituted a remarkable guide for reflection and later decisiveness for our own existence. Insofar as their precepts that demand understanding and continual exercise. And these 9 concepts are these. Number 1, do not think dishonestly. Think honestly and truthfully. Do not harbor sinister designs.
Real quick, I just want to add, because I'm thinking that there's 2 reasons why that you shouldn't do that. 3, there's the moral issues with that, but also you'll make bad decisions that way. And then the other thing is other people can feel it. If they're sensitive enough, they can feel, they call it saki, the killer force. So if you don't have those intentions, then the enemy can't read you in that sense.
Yeah, very true. And I like the idea of do not harbor sinister designs. To me, for some reason, that still comes back to thinking in the black box. We hear our detractors who constantly blame these invisible forces for their lot in life and everything. And to me, that's just individuals who can't look, as the old saying goes, can't look at the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
And so rather than seeing the good aspect of life and even the so-called people that are their enemies that claim, they always harbor on the negative. And to me, just having that negative mindset can literally set you back months, years, and even decades. And
It'll
I've
kill
heard,
you because
yeah,
it'll kill. I mean, they talk about the telemeters or whatever. If you feel that everyone's out to get you, I mean, that hurts you. That harms your health. That harms your body. Unfortunately, sadly, you've got black folks that die at 55, 60. You know what I mean? I think that's a big part of it, to be honest.
yeah, I believe too. And the second part says, the way is in training. One must always continue to train. Now, this one I definitely holds true for me because, one, I'm a musician, and my favorite instrument is the bass guitar.
Okay.
And
Keep
it,
party
it,
jumping. All right.
for me though, like when it comes down to musical instruments, that will always be my first love.
Mm,
And even though now, as a jazz musician, I'm starting to learn other instruments like, say, the drums or
hmm
even the saxophone, I will still make it my business to make sure that I give more practice to the bass. And sometimes when I go play at open house gigs and everything, I would have people come up to me and be like, wow, your skills on the bass is just phenomenal. And to me, I'm not really thinking like I'm doing anything fancy and all. It's just, the practices that I do and the attention that I pay to details with that instrument. I really put more emphasis on that than I do with the other instruments. So it's something with that, the way is in training and always continue to train.
mm.
Definitely, I can relate to that concept as well.
Yeah, that's one of the laws of the shinobi. Basically, the law is one of them to carry out the assigned training. So, yeah, very, very similar.
Yeah. And then number three, it says, become acquainted with
Every
every
art.
art. This I could definitely say I can relate to because even now, when I started off learning taiko, you could say that's my first introduction to any form of Japanese arts. Now I'm starting to incorporate more of the samurai training, as far as like with the sword and any type of physical training that comes with it, and even learning a little bit of the shinobi techniques and all. There is definitely benefits of being an all-around interest in the arts, and even like you could say modern arts or Western arts, like say poetry or meditation, or even just artwork or music. You know, that's just being acquainted to Zen and actually being
Mm.
able to have your mind be elevated to where you become a completely different person outside of the frivolous things in life.
I would add to that because Zen and Mikyo, they're kind of polar opposites in a lot of ways, but
Hmm.
they're complementary. So, from a Mikyo perspective, becoming acquainted with every art is just good. It's good training because, when you're in that void level, when you are basically living in a very spontaneous manner, if you have some knowledge of what the opponent is going to do, or there's kind of a Japanese trait called kakshige, which basically means hidden art or hidden ability. So sometimes, like, some Japanese people will go to like art class, or they'll go to dance class, or they'll have some skill like your bass guitar, and they just basically practice in secret, so then they can actually come out and just like blow the doors off of everybody when they're called upon, to do whatever it is that they do. So, that I think that's a deeply ingrained trait that can serve you well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Then number four says, know the way of all professions. This one was a little bit tricky for me, but to me, what I get at that is you learn the purpose behind that profession and see how it can be incorporated into your life in some form of fashion. Um, it could also kind of be used in, say, the corporate world. You don't have to be the trick of all trades, or excuse me, the jack of all trades, but you can kind of get an inkling of, hey, this is what's going on in finances. Even though I work in IT, it's some things that I can do in IT that may be able to be boostful to the finance department. It to me, I think it's stuff like this to where you understand the world around you and you act accordingly.
Exactly, because if you don't, I mean, again, unfortunately, the black box does not encourage looking outside the black box. So I agree with your I agree with that. I mean, basically, you don't have to be like a master of every profession, but you should know something about it. And especially for a shinobi, if you're going to pose as a carpenter, you should probably know a little bit about carpeting or know a lot about carpeting, actually. So,
Exactly. And really, that goes exactly what you were saying earlier. Like, majority of people, when they think of the ninja, they think of a person that's just clothed in all black and trying to,
hmm,
so to speak, walk around and not be seen.
right.
No, that's not a true ninja. A true ninja could be somebody who you're going to the doctor's office and you're just thinking you're being helped by, say, a nurse practitioner, not realizing that that nurse practitioner might actually be working in a different department, but she's being called upon to assist with something in the doctor's office. Stuff like that. That is a true ninja. And they're so good at building up their strengths and minimizing their weaknesses that you never would think that that individual, huh? They actually do such and such work. That that's ninjutsu right there.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. I mean, yeah. Well, in certain ways, also, I think it's important to say that um, oftentimes the shinobi would exaggerate their um, their abilities. So, like when the detractors say that we're this or we're that, I embrace it with pride. So, I
Mm-hmm.
embrace my Oreo or my hashtag dark white um, experience because they're putting these labels on us, but what they're really doing is they're building us up. So even if the misconceptions of the shinobi are still out there, you don't like see a massive media campaign saying stop slandering shinobi. They're not out there lobbying to update their image because, well, that just makes it easier for them to operate undetected.
Yeah, yeah, I'm definitely with you on that because it's just like, hey, whatever you want to believe about me, go right ahead. I'm not here to change
Feel
your
free.
mind. Exactly. I'm not here to change your mind, but I'm definitely not going to share with you what I'm really doing. So have fun. All right. So number 5, it says know the difference between loss and gain in worldly matters.
Mm.
I definitely, this one is kind of tough with me as far as the implications from it, but I can definitely say probably somebody from your background, Mr. Jones, that you work in more of the broker standpoint and all. I think you probably better understand the importance of knowing the difference between losses and gains when it comes down to worldly stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure what his original context was, and I think that would be important to interpret that. But I can say, so for example, if I buy a stock and it's not going anywhere and I'm down 2%, I'm not going to hold on to it and lose more money. I'm going to sell it and I'm going to buy something else. Or vice versa. I might feel like I really like this investment. It's down, but I'm going to hold on to it anyway. And hopefully I'll be, vindicated later. So, if anything, I would also probably say there is such a thing as omote and ura. So, omote is the outside, the plain, the obvious. Ura is more of the hidden, the um, beneath the surface aspect of something. So it may look like, so for example, from a shinobi point of view, let's say that my job is to get information from a castle and I pose as a gardener, right, to get this information. So the guards might come out and they might kick dirt in my face. They may spit on me and they may, call me a worthless peasant or something like that, right? So from
Mm.
everyone else's standpoint, I'm losing. But the truth is, I'm winning because I'm basically achieving my objective. I'm getting my mission done. And to really translate that to modern times, some people would say that he Kunin, he's a sellout, he's a bootlick. That's what they say, right? If you're working your way up through the organization, or if you got your own business maybe, and you're working with different people, if you're not doing it in the black box approved manner, they in their eyes, you're gonna look like you're losing. But from your perspective, you're laughing all the way to the bank. So I think that probably feeds into it too.
Yeah, and more that I think about it is pretty much like the basic concept of yin and yang. There's
Mm,
a time and place for everything.
yeah.
So there will be times where you have to cut your losses and learn from it. But then there will also be times where it's a great opportunity to where if you strike at the right moment, you will definitely reap the benefits. So
Yeah.
more and more, hearing your information and really kind of thinking it through, that's where it's now starting to make sense to me is the concept of there's time and place for everything. So it may seem like a loss now, but if you learn from it, it's not per se a true loss. Likewise, when you actually gain something, the importance is learning what you gain from it and applying it for future references.
And that it kind of reminds me of kind of the Bible verse, what does it profit a man to
Gain the
uh,
whole world
and
and
lose
lose
his
his
soul?
soul.
Yeah. So on the one hand, you think that you're winning, but at the end, it's a bad deal. So it's that kind of discernment. So in Naruto, they often have the genjutsu, right? Like
Hmm.
Itachi or Sasuke or whoever. And basically, you have to learn how to say kai, and get released from it. Well, genjutsu is a thing. So there's a whole series of techniques around that, and there were several genjutsu schools, which I'm not trained in that, but I do know that they're out there. They have scrolls and everything that go on to explain how that works. Naruto is closer to the source material than many people would expect,
Mm.
to be honest. But anyway, um, so that is where. So we have the concept of Shingon, which basically means to see with the eyes and the mind of God. You have to be able to look through the illusion. So this might be a good deal on the surface, but maybe it's not a good deal in the long run. So you have to kind of know the difference.
Yeah, yeah, and to me, yeah, you just put it way perfectly than I can explain it. But the next one, number 6, it says develop intuitive judgment and understanding for everything.
For everything.
To me, I if I could break it down personally, is remove your emotions to understand what is going on around you.
Hmm.
And I think for a lot of people that live in the black box, they have no choice but to live off emotions because anything outside of emotions wouldn't make sense to them. Whereas for us, because we're constantly learning and we thrive on learning, we have the ability to remove emotions and actually look at the concept and the abstract ideas from it. It's like I mentioned on my series with Logic Finance on the War series or the War Room series. The characters that we're talking about, we're removing our emotions. We're not per se looking at them for the wrongs that they did. We're looking at them from a basic human standpoint and understanding what led them to make those decisions. And a lot of times, even up to this point, a lot of the backgrounds we've been reading on to individuals right now, the aspect of their life and the things that led them to the current state that they're at right now during our series, it was kind of like they were no different than other human beings that went on to do actually a lot more worser than what history portrays them. And so to me, this concept of develop intuitive judgment and understanding for everything literally for me means the concept of remove your emotions to get to the truth.
And see, that's the great weakness of the black box, because they can't separate the person from their deeds.
Mm-hmm.
They're basically like they always proclaim, the personal is the political, but that means that you have to basically, and this is why we see this whole thing now, like they want to get rid of the statues and everything else. They want to reform or reshape the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they were to do that, let's say that they had their way, and let's say that they basically banned teaching slavery. So then, the next generation would not have any knowledge of slavery, and they would be vulnerable to be re-enslaved by the same ideologies that were justified to enslave people back then. I mean, that's the danger. And I would say that going back to the kind of the faculties of mind. So a lot of people get stuck on one particular element, or
Mm-hmm.
they get stuck there. And they don't really move to master anything else. So you've got some people that are very, very brainiac, but they suck with people, right? Because they don't have any intuitive sense, or they don't really like to use their emotions. Emotions aren't bad in and of themselves. It's just a question of appropriateness. If it's appropriate to be
Mm-hmm.
emotional, then have at it. If it's not, then don't. Now, this is easier said than done, and that was where the cultivation comes in. But to me, when I read that, it sounds just like you were saying, don't let emotions cloud your judgment. Um, but also, I'm thinking that if you're thinking spontaneously, so where you're thinking appropriately or using your appropriate faculties of mind, then you will understand the situation, the lay of the land, the enemy, what's happening with politics. You'll kind of know without necessarily um, spending 60 hours researching the topic, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, there are times, especially like in the war room, you don't really have time for a 12-month course. You got to make decisions quick. So
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, it definitely goes back to knowing the difference between loss and gain in worldly matters, the yin and yang. To me, it like you said, is based on knowing knowing your surroundings and
yeah,
knowing having awareness of what's going on around you and being able to make the right decisions that will count the most in the long run. Because see, some
yeah,
people, or actually you would say a lot of people, they just make snap decisions right here and there, and they're just like, oh, we'll deal with this now and deal with the consequences later. But you need to be able to make a sound decision that, yes, it looks right now, but in the long run will have major ripple effects. And
Yeah,
for a
because
lot of
it's.
people, it's hard for them. Uh huh. Mm-hmm.
Oh no, go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
I was going to end it saying for a lot of people, it's hard to make those type of decisions when you're being thrown with so much emotions here and there. But yeah, I
Yeah.
just wanted to end with that.
I mean, the over reliance on emotion will destroy. I mean, just look at the black box. It's in
Mm-hmm.
shambles by any stretch of, any figure that you can look at. It's in complete shambles. And it's only because of the kindness of strangers that the black box manages to survive at all. Let's just be real. So hyper emotionality is not a good thing. So one has to, and unfortunately, this isn't something that, is taught in school or anything like that. I mean, these things that we talk about, I'm actually working with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my daughter's a bit young, but my son is getting to the age where now we're having these conversations. So I can kind of get him to think about, because he's stuck on logic and sensation. He's a really, he's a kid that likes to touch everything and take stuff apart and all that kind of stuff. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, that's cool, but you also need to be able to feel and sense, use your intuition, and then also kind of express your emotion, because he's not really one to really do that. And I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
get him to kind of be flexible in that sense. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing, and I'm not saying that it is, but this is basically kind of basic requirements, and I would say not just for shinobi, but basically for anyone who is going to face death, or for anyone that is trying to protect someone from death. If you're looking at death in the face, you can't be caught up in any one faculty, or you're dead. That's pretty much what it comes down to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, to finish up the last three, starting with number 7, it says, perceive those things which cannot be seen.
Hmm.
In other words, having foresight. And definitely for those who think in the black box, majority of them just do not have foresight. Now they'll claim that if you go down such and such path, you'll run into the evil white man and, so to speak, the supremacy and institutionalized racism, but that's not foresight. That's them just projecting their
Yeah,
mishaps on yourself. So,
yeah,
true foresight is okay, I see the path they're going down. Excuse me. It's not something that I want to go down. I'm going to go in this direction because this direction seems to have many brothers or people who think like me actually do a little bit better in life. So I'm going to do that.
and I want to add to that too, because um, as a warrior, I think he's also referring to, like we talked about earlier, the saki, the killer force.
Mm-hmm.
If you so in the Bujinkan, there is the Godan test, the fifth degree black belt test. So basically, what you do is you sit in the ground, and then you have someone behind you with the sword. Usually, it's like a wooden blade. Sometimes it's the real thing. And the person who has a sword, their job is basically to cut you down. That's their job.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're cutting you down or trying to, they basically are going to put their full energy, emotion, all of that into it. And your job is to basically perceive that. And if you are able to feel that force and get out of the way, then you pass. If you get hit, obviously you fail. So,
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, I think there's also, perception in terms of being able to see around the bend and kind of calculate risk and outcome. But I also think there's an actual kinetic or psychic component to that, what he's saying, and you basically develop that through training and experience. Like we have one particular exercise where like someone is standing behind you, so you close your eyes, and the person that's standing behind you, all they're supposed to do is they're either going to touch your right shoulder or your left shoulder, and depending on what shoulder, you raise your hand. So basically, you start feeling the other person's intention. There's a lot of stuff that people will do to build that sense. So that's basically building up your intuitive sense along with your other faculties. So I think there's also the foresight piece, and then there's also, and I mean, going back to the argument about white supremacy. I mean,
Definitely, we have to get that in there.
yeah, we did get that in there, random white supremacy. So if you're working with Bill and you are on point in terms of your ability to feel or to sense, you'll know. If Bill doesn't like you, you'll be able to feel it right away. Or you'll be able to
Hmm.
feel it in time. You'll be able to truly be able to tell that. It's kind of the same thing like, when you see a girl, if she likes you, if you're really open to that, you'll know that she likes you. Like young Hinata, I looked at her and I knew that she liked me from the start. And that took a lot of pressure off because I did not have to pursue, because I knew that she would come after me eventually. So, I mean, I think these are the things that also go along with the person who is facing death has to develop the foresight as well as the insight.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I forgot mention this. So, Mr. Kitagakure Jones, the nickname for his lovely wife is Hinata. Now I was like, you know
Oh,
what?
whoops, yeah, I need to.
I don't really have a nickname for my special lady. So I finally realized, you know what? I'm gonna call her Kagome because I actually like
I go,
Kagome
okay,
from
all right,
Inuyasha.
okay.
So, but so you mentioned because Miss Kagome, I was recently having a talk with her and all, and she was telling me about how it was something about me that she just knew that I she in a way she says she's like she just knew that I was the guy for her. I was the
Mm,
man for her. And
mm,
so she said that she just knew that as long as I she treated me with the utmost respect and everything that I would see her in the same way that she saw me.
mm.
And it's funny because, looking back on how we met and everything, it was just like, I was aware of her and I was aware of, she was unique and all, but the more I got to really get to know her and really vet her, it was like, wow, she's actually the type of woman that fits my ideal of a girlfriend and also as a wife.
Mhm.
So it was like I
Mm.
didn't even have to like really sh- go out of my way to get her attention. It was
Right.
just like she fits the bill and we just act accordingly.
And the interesting part with that, and that's a good segue, because in certain areas they're having the game versus non-game debate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So like I roll with MOT. I'm like I've never, for what me and Young Hinata have built, game wasn't a factor there. And I also wanted to say that, like I said earlier, a lot of these concepts are born out of Japanese culture and experience and blood and genetics. So,
Hmm.
like in my Nimpo training, the more I got into Japanese mode, the better I did, the better my technique became. And talking about yourself and Kagome-san, um, Japanese people, I think, have a better developed sense of intuition. They
Oh yeah.
know, and they can't explain why. Like if you really want to, make her upset, which you probably don't want to do, but if you really want to make her upset, ask her to explain logically why, and she probably won't be able to do it
Hmm.
because there is a irrational quality. Now, in the West, we would say irrational bad. What I'm saying is that they're not always so locked in to the logical
Hmm.
faculty. They're using their intuition, their emotional, and they're using their sensual, in other words, the five senses. I find that as a culture, and of course, everyone's different, but they're more conducive to express themselves without saying anything, and they don't need a reason.
Hmm.
So you probably heard the expression "gikai shite kudasai," which means "please suspend your judgment."
Yep.
It's
Hmm.
kind of related to that. I think that's my take.
No, I to me, it flawlessly explains, the dynamics, and definitely other brothers who have dated women from that side of the world. Majority of them have told me, and even MOT has told me, it's like, you know, he they don't have to do anything to gain the respect and affection of their women. As long as they were true to themselves as men, the women just follow through. And to
Yeah.
me, that's where I'm like you, like this whole talk about game and so to speak. In fact, I heard one guy talk about no matter where you go in life, whatever female you deal with, you're gonna have to need some game. And I say to myself, well, the only time I've actually had to use any resemblance of game is when I was dealing with westernized women.
Yeah.
As soon as I got a chance to deal with women from a cultured environment, women who actually put their men first and, and who believes in being of high feminine quality, I never had to use game at all. I just had to be Sigma Jones.
Yep. Exactly. And I don't want to take up too much time with this, but I think it's a good thing. If you don't act like Sigma Jones, if I don't come to the table as Kitty Gakade Jones, if I expect her to pick up my slack, she's going to resent me for that. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
trick. You gotta be you gotta be in full possession of your powers as a man.
Yeah.
And
It, it,
I remember one time specifically, young Hinata said something. I'm like, respect me as a man. And she kind of looked at me, and I never had to repeat that phrase again. I only said it once.
yeah. I mean, to me, just be a man. Like, I know it's been harped on here in westernized America and all and such, but literally in those other cultures, as long as you true to your masculine energy and you're true to who you are as a man and you're not, see, the thing is this, and I'm gonna drop this nugget for those who are just starting to become practitioners of SYSPM. Your validation should only come from within.
Hmm.
No outside validation should be in your life. When
Facts.
it comes down to who you are as an individual, only you validate who you are.
Hmm.
But the thing is this, when you validate who you are and you stick to your true inner being, everything else in life falls into place.
Yeah.
So if the women of America don't like the true you, just travel outside the country. And before you know it, you will have quality, cultured females who are more than happy to be within your presence. Now I'm gonna
Yeah.
just leave it there
All
because
right.
too
Yeah,
many
too much.
brothers, yeah, too many brothers like to talk about the females and everything. And don't
Right.
get me wrong, there's a time and place for that. But this here, we're about the Japanese culture. And don't get me wrong, later on, we're going to have more conversations about Miss Hinata and Miss Kagome. You know, they will
Yeah, I
definitely
like
be.
Kagome. That's a good. Is she similar? Well, maybe we'll talk about it another time. Is she kind of similar to Kagome in terms of personality, or
Yeah, I would definitely say she has a feistiness to her,
okay, all right.
and she's one where she sometimes just want to make sure that I'm sick with Jones. But then
Mhm.
there's another side to her. Like there's an episode on Inuyasha where um Inuyasha gets injured by this peach tree and everything, and he falls off a cliff, and Kagome thought Inuyasha was gone forever and whatnot, but he comes back, and there's a moment there where she kind of let her feelings show a little bit.
Mhm.
My Kagome have a tendency to kind of do that. Like
Okay, all right.
sometimes she feel, sometimes she feels like the worst has happened to me, but then I let her know like I'm fine. Like you know, I'm me. Like it's going to take more to injure Sigma Jones,
Right.
and that little side of her, being so concerned and being so caring, it's just
Mhm.
like, all right, I like that side of you. I understand sometimes you just want to make sure that you know I'm me and everything, but there's a side of you that you know it is. I can't really describe it in words, but it's a side of her to where it's just like I can't stop helping but enjoying her feminine energy. So
Mhm. All right. The reason why I ask, and I'm sure we can definitely move on after that, but I mean, the reason why I ask is that young Hinata, I call her that because she's definitely a Hinata type. I mean, like,
yeah,
especially like if you watch Boruto, that's basically how things go down at House Kitty Gakure. So,
yeah, I believe it. I definitely believe it. So I was just thinking like, well, I haven't gave my girl a nickname on here, and it just hit me. It's like, yeah, she's mostly like a
Kagome.
Kagome.
Yeah.
Like that's really her personality. But yeah, moving on. So the last two, number 8 says, pay attention even to trifles. Now I find this interesting because to me, it's kind of saying even pay attention to what your enemy is doing. Because obviously detractors, they want to try to throw us off our mindset and make it seem
Hmm.
like, you know, we don't know any better and all. But in actuality, what our detractors don't realize is we actually learn a lot from them. And we also understand that their ways of living is literally kind of like being put into a test tube and watching them under a microscope. Like every facet of their life is on full display for everybody to see. And that's
Everybody.
and that's why I find it funny when, you know, the arguments about the Pookies and Ray Rays and the female detractors would make it seem like all black men are the same. But yet, I always tell them that, well, for some reason, the Rebeccas, the Mylins, the Marisols, they definitely know how to pick out the best and the brightest
Oh
of us
yeah,
black men.
that they do. That they do.
So to me, pay attention even to trifles. It's just kind of like, look, we understand the talking point of our detractors. And what makes us even more dangerous in their eyes when they see us is the fact that they know that we know their tactics. We
Mm.
know how they're trying almost every book in the trade to try to get us back to the plantation, and it will never work.
You know what's worse though, and this is something that in the future, if you have children, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is something I'm noticing, and this is something that I'm definitely pushing back against. If they can't have you, they're going to want your children.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So you get out, you're doing something different, and then the kids are coming up, and they try to put all this crap in their head about they need to be an ally and they need to do this and they need to do that because you black, we black, your mama black. And
Which, not to cut you off, but later on, I'm gonna be doing a stream talk about my recent discovery of my genetics,
oh,
cause
okay, all
uh,
right.
cause Sigma Jones, I didn't know I was that diverse until
Yeah, you are a
my
diverse brother.
so my ancestry includes women from other cultures who are definitely of the fair skin side. So stay tuned for that. But continue on, good sir.
Yeah, well, see, and that's exactly why I'm so big on know your lineage, because if you know your lineage, then that talking point doesn't work. But when I hear pay attention even to trifles, it reminds me of a story from the Hagakure, the book of the samurai, and I'm gonna paraphrase really quickly. So basically, it says that there's a festival in Kyoto, and they make these lacquer lunch boxes, and they spend a lot of time making sure that everything is decorated right and everything looks good so they can have these lacquer boxes at the festival. And then basically when the festival is done, they take these very ornamental boxes and they basically crush them underfoot. And then the Hagakure says the end is important in all things. So if we think about Japanese culture, um, look at their clothes, look at the quality of their swords, look at the cleanliness of their society, look at how long their cars last. And the reason for that is that they pay attention to the small stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're paying attention to the small items, then they know that when the big event comes, they can handle it. And then basically they just let it go. They don't hold on to stuff. They just kind of toss it. You know what I mean? So I think that that is a definite strain in Japanese culture because, even small things lead to very big consequences, just like decision making. Decision today may lead to disastrous or to, advantageous outcomes tomorrow.
No, you are absolutely correct about the Japanese paying the absolute attention to small details. And to
Mm,
me, the biggest prime example of that, look at their car manufacturing.
yeah,
As somebody who drives a Toyota Corolla as of right
me too.
now, and I live in probably one of the most harshest conditions in the United States, in on the West Coast, Southern Cal, the Mojave Desert, and everything. Those cars are some of the most durable cars I have ever driven. Like, it's phenomenal how you can go miles and miles without needing to change your oil, and
Yeah,
how the brakes on those cars, even under those conditions, is so well maintained. It, to me, I know the Japanese, when they designed those cars, they would take into account, okay, what would happen if it was in this environment or in that environment? How would it hold up? How would it do that? And literally, they have designed their cars that's almost like, it's almost to the point like those cars could maybe probably survive a nuclear attack if
nuclear.
you think about it.
Well, and like, when you talk to Kagome-san, she'll tell you, the Japanese expectation is superior quality, and nobody complains louder and more viciously than the Japanese housewife.
Mm-hmm.
So they already know what the deal is. Like my roommate, he drove a Lexus. It was like 20 years old. Engine ran like a dream. You know what I mean? Like the only reason why he got rid of that car is because the body itself was falling apart. But the engine, it was just like like it just rolled off the assembly line. So I think that's a huge aspect. And like, I talked about selection and vetting. I looked at that stuff. I was looking at that stuff. So in America, everyone says, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Magical thinking. It's going to work out just fine. But you're gambling with your seed, your blood, and your genetics. Are you sure that you want to do that without taking a look at the small stuff? I don't know.
And that's one of the reasons why, like I will continue to say, SYSBM is not for every brother.
That's right.
Because if you're looking at things from the short term standpoint, okay, sure, go with the flow. Do what's best for you. But when you take into consideration anything long term, and especially marriage, you have to, and I quote, you have to think genetically. In other
Mm,
words, you have to be a eugenist. And I know that's a touchy subject that not many folks want to go about, but I mean, you can look at almost every aspect of society and in nature and all. There is some form of eugenics. Arranged marriage is a form of eugenics. There's people who have to pay a dowry to prove that they're worthy of carrying on their namesake in the family. Like, that's a form of eugenics. And it is something to where I know you mentioned this on a while back about how, in the Japanese culture, yourself being married, that your name is now included in the family registry.
yep.
And my Kagome, she was telling me how, if I continue on with this training, samurai training and everything, and we were to go on and get married, my name in the family registry in her culture would literally put me down as a samurai. And that is of high importance.
Mm. And like our primary detractor, the academic. I had mentioned that, young Kinata is from a samurai family. And so, I'm a part of her family. So therefore, on some level, probably not officially, but we have that status. And the detractor was like, he said blah blah blah, whoop the scoop. And I'm like, well, no, you don't understand. See, these are the things. I mean, you've got people that are wholly ignorant of how other cultures work.
Mm-hmm.
You literally could go down as samurai in her family koseki, her family registry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not make believe. We're not making this up. And this is what MBD was talking about. That's marriage, right? That's an alliance of families. That's, everything depends on it. And best believe that the Japanese and everybody else are thinking in these terms.
I mean, to me, I look at it like this, and I'm mainly putting on myself. I either look at how do you want to go down in history of, when your descendants come to your gravesite and they be like, oh, that's Sigma Jones. He just stayed in this environment all his life. Didn't really do much. He always talk about white supremacy is holding him back and everything, and so to speak, like he didn't have much going for him.
Right.
Versus your descendants come to your gravesite like, oh, this is Sigma Jones. He was the first Afro samurai of his his wife's clan and everything. Like,
Right.
to me, that's what leaving a legacy is all about. And like
Yes,
MBD pointed out, that's the foundation of SYSBM.
yes, it
It
is.
always has been and will continue to be for the children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They don't hear us though, and they don't. I mean, listen, these people do not want rival noble houses springing up. They don't want that. They don't want this competition.
No, certainly not. Which leads to the last tenet, which
Right.
says, do nothing which is of no use. And to me, that pretty much, if that one tenet of itself highlights the black box, because to them,
Yeah.
everything is someone else's fault, not
Yeah.
theirs.
Yeah.
Therefore, no sense of accountability, no
Mm.
sense of responsibility. Pretty much, you're just going through life just at the mercy and the whims of someone else or somebody else that nobody knows who it is.
What it
And,
is, and
oh, yeah, or what it is. And you're pretty much just doing nothing.
yeah. I mean, sadly, I mean, if we were to follow that precept, and I've been following this precept for a long time. This is why I had to cut out a lot of people from my life,
Mm-hmm.
because what were they doing? I mean, what what I mean? Just so people are wanting, and people are going to argue against it, because I mean, if you do that and you do it faithfully, then who is going to be in your world? Only people of quality and value. That's it. And everybody else can hit the road. The song "Hit the Road" and all of that. And they don't want that, because they obviously want a Sigma Jones or a Killiagakide Jones, or that successful brother who's doing something different. They need you to be in that box with them, because they're well on their way. I mean, and they're being goaded into it, and they're voluntarily participating in it. They are on their way to underclass status for centuries. I don't see how they get out of this, between you, me, and the fence post, because if we all abided by that particular rule, they would be in a world of trouble. Because if you really think about value and who's adding value, a lot of folks in that position are simply not doing that.
Yeah, and you know what? That pretty much inspired me. I'm gonna do a video later on, a pre-made video, and just upload it here, where literally the concept's gonna be, how do you want your descendants to remember you? Do you want your
That's a good
descendants to
video.
do you want your descendants to remember you as somebody who all they did was complain about white supremacy?
And don't
Oh,
forget racism.
yeah. Or do you want your descendants to remember you as a once living samurai?
Mm,
Like, to me, or better yet, descendants remember you as a shinobi, a verified shinobi.
yeah.
Like, I think this is what brothers got to really come to terms with. You only get one shot in this life,
Yeah.
and it will be a total waste to live this life. And when you on your deathbed, you have more regrets than you do satisfactions. And I can honestly say there were some individuals, at least in my life, when they were on their deathbed, that they've actually have told my parents and even myself one time that if only they could live one more day, they would do the things that they've never done before.
Mm,
And to me, that's very profound,
right.
because when you have people that live in the black box, like I said before, they're living on the whims of others.
Mm.
And
They really
so
are.
because they're living on the whims of others, they will never truly be able to see life for what it is. And so for me, it's just like, nah, I only got one shot at this in life. So I'm going to make it so that I leave a print somewhere
Right.
and leave it to where my descendants, when they come to my grave, wherever it may be, they can look at me and be like, you know what? I want to be like Sigma Jones someday.
That's it. That's it. I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, this is, and what was really offensive to me is all these people will do anything, they'll say anything, they'll take any kind of action to keep you in the box
Mm-hmm.
and to make you squander your life. I mean, they will rob you of your life and your life energy and your life force if you let them. And when you say, "Sorry, kotowaru," "I refuse," then they get mad. I'm like, "Are you kidding?" And then it's not like I mean, it would be one thing if, like, there was, like, some real tangible benefits or something like that, but no, they expect you to squander your life and die because you happen to have a certain skin shade.
Mm-hmm. In
What
other
the
words,
hell?
in other words, like you said, they want to have genetic unison.
Mm,
And to me, I'm not about genetic unison.
yep.
I'm about genetic diversity.
Mm,
And the reason being is because the human race have only gone this far in history because of genetic diversity. Any anthropologist worth their salt will tell you that's how the human race was able to continue as long as we have been.
mm. Well, that's profound. That's what it's about, and that's why we do these things to say, listen, there is a better, yes, better alternative to what a lot of people have grown up being brainwashed with, what they've been taught to believe. Um, you know, it's not acceptable anymore. The old ways just don't cut it anymore.
Nope, it simply just don't. Well, this wraps up episode 7 of the Black Ronin series. My co-host Kitagakade, as always, good sir. Thank you for stopping by. Any final thoughts you would like to give before we end the stream?
All right, yeah, I will make them brief because we've talked about a great many things, and I really enjoy these conversations because I think that we basically can translate our experience of Japanese culture to a level where brothers who maybe are outside of the culture or don't have those experiences can relate to it and decide if this is a path that they want to pursue. And I can tell you that based on the training that I've had and the spirit that I've cultivated, that I was thankfully able to make very good decisions, and the rewards have been vast, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I will, safely say that I'm going to be an ancestor, someone that is revered and remembered and respected because of the monumental decisions that I've made. And so, as we continue on with this Black Loaning series, I'm looking forward to future topics because this is entertaining and educational.
No doubt. And pretty much to reiterate what Kitagakade just masterfully put forward, I myself, like I said, next month will make a year since I took the greatest trip to this day has been the most life-changing event, second to none. And that is stepping soil on the land of the rising sun. And since that trip. A part of me is just itching to get back there. A part of me is just itching to build a legacy from that experience. And I, for one, you know, Kitagakure right now is years ahead of me, but I'm pretty much on the same path as him to where essentially this is SYSBM Ronin style. And I'm pretty much just putting it out there for you guys out there who wants to see what this life is all about. Me and Kitagakure, we're going to have fun with this series. We're going to be talking on so many topics that relates to these particular elements. And for that matter, it's for you to decide and for you to choose whether you want to experience it for yourself or not. We're not going to hold you against your will and say you need to experience this or else. No. We just put it out there, let you guys see for yourself, and then let you come to the decision if you're about that life or not. Because Sigma Jones and Kitagakure Jones, we about that Japanese style. So, with that said, I'm Sigma Jones. This is Kitagakure Jones. Thanks for tuning in. Till next time on the Black Ronins of Japan, sayonara.
お疲れ様。